February 2nd, 2020. If you would, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bishop Gehring will give the invocation.
And to see 2020. Nothing that any of us have done, God, that you have spared us to live to see a new year, but we pause to say thank you. We thank you, our Father and our God, for what you're going to do in the new elected leadership of this city. We pray, God, for Mr. Grant, as he leads this city in the best way that he knows how. Give him wisdom, give him knowledge, give him understanding. And to all of the elected city council members, we pray for their leadership and for all of those that remain to serve the great city of Canton. We thank you, God, for Mayor Hopgood, who has done a wonderful work for the city of Canton. Continue to bless him and continue to watch over him. Father, we thank you for a city, and we thank you for leadership that remembers to put God first. It is because of the leadership that they have put God first that the city of Canton will continue to do great things. Thank you for the citizens of this great city and for Cherokee County. Thank you for our first responders, God. They have a great task before them in this year. Watch over them and watch over their family. We bless you, Lord, and we give you all the praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. It's great to see everyone here tonight. It's almost scary. It's like a terrible zoning meeting or something when everybody shows up, you know. But welcome. Certainly glad to have everyone here tonight. I have the distinct honor tonight and privilege of swearing in the new administration for the new decade that we are actually entering now. And the process will be we will swear in council members from the various wards, and they will take their seat, and then I will swear in the new mayor, okay? The first council member is a returning council member, Ms. Wilson. So we're going to do this down front, and we'll get the show on the road and move along so that the new administration can get to work as soon as possible. Old hand at this. Now, how many years is this? 23 years already. So she's done this many times before. So if you will, okay, raise your hand or put your hand on the Bible, either one. Okay. You ready? I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully perform the duties of council member of this city.
I do solemnly swear that I will perform the duties of council member for this city.
And that I will support and defend the charter thereof.
And that I will support and defend the charter thereof.
As well as the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia and of the United States of America.
And will support and defend the laws of the state of Georgia and the United States of America.
Congratulations.
So help me God. I appreciate all of you being here tonight, and I appreciate the support you've given me in the past. I look forward to working with all of you and everyone in the city of Canton for the next 4 years so that we can continue to make Canton the great, the beautiful, the safe, and the historic city that it has been in the past, that it is now, and that it will be in the future. Thank you all. Come back.
Our Ward 2 elected council member, Sean Toland. Sean? Coming up. Oh, I'm sorry, you want this? Okay. All right. This, believe it or not, this is a family affair when you get elected. Your whole family is involved, so we appreciate all of you being here, too. Okay, ready?
Yes, sir.
I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully perform the duties of council member of this city,
I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully perform the duties of councilman of this fair city,
and that I will support and defend the charter thereof,
and that I will support and defend the charter thereof,
as well as the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia and of the United States of America,
as well as the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia and the United States of America.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. So I just wanted to say a few brief words around friends and family, duty and honor. To my family, most of which are on this closed circuit here from all around the world. You inspire me. My wife of almost 37 years has been by my side and supported me, and my beautiful son who could not be here tonight because he's not feeling well. My awesome grandchildren, Liam, Brody, and Levi, and my wonderful daughter-in-law, Lindsay, as well as my daughter, who I think had to take Levi out into the outside. So thank you all for the support. Regarding duty, what I'm about to embark on is a duty. I learned that lesson from my mother, who has been a servant leader of battered women for over 3 decades now, and has done tremendous work. So I guess you can say it's in my DNA. And then the last thing is honor. I'm completely and utterly honored to be able to serve this city. I have gained a lot of friends. Most of you are here, and I really thank you for your support. I vow to you that I will work every day to ensure, as Ms. Wilson said, that we make Canton the best possible Canton it could ever be. So thank you.
Okay, Ward 3, Ms. Brooke Smith. Okay, are you ready? All right. I do solemnly swear that I will perform the duties of council member of this city,
I do solemnly swear that I will perform the duties of council member of this city,
and that I will support and defend the charter thereof,
and that I will support and defend the charter thereof,
as well as the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia and of the United States of America.
as well as the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia and the United States of America.
Congratulations.
Thank you all for your overwhelming encouragement from my old friends through the whole campaign, my family, of course, and all the inspiring new people who have come into my lives, the residents of Canton, who just make me want to do this job so well and so enthusiastically. I, of course, have to thank my husband, Brian, and my kids, Reed and Audra, who are super happy to be here tonight. And they have really stepped up the game since summer and done a lot of stuff that they never thought they would get thrown into a ring like this. So I really appreciate it. There's a quote that I really love that goes, "She believed she could, so she did." And I think the thing to remember is that she never does it alone. I'm really excited to work with this tremendous team and to keep momentum going from all the great work that they've done in 2020 and beyond. Thank you all very much.
Congratulations. Okay, now, our mayor-elect, Bill Grant. Okay, you're ready. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully perform the duties of mayor of this city,
I do solemnly swear I will faithfully perform the duties of mayor of this city,
and that I will support and defend the charter thereof,
and I will support and defend the charter thereof,
as well as the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia and of the United States of America.
as well as the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia and the United States of America.
Congratulations, Mr. Mayor. Before I let Bill speak, I want to say one other thing, and I've had a gavel here with his name engraved on it for quite some time here. I knew what was going to happen, and I'm so proud that it did. And so I will turn this gavel over to Bill, and I'll be on my way. So this is one meeting I don't have to stay late for. Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor Hopgood. I want to thank Mayor Hopgood for the path he's paved. He leaves, he's a hard act to follow, so I look forward to it. I want to thank my family who came down, especially my very first niece and my second niece who drove all the way down from Dalton, Georgia in this rain. And thank all of you for coming out in this terrible weather. I'm hoping this is kind of like they say, if it rains on your wedding day, it's good luck. So we're hoping that it holds true for my tenure as mayor. But I couldn't be more proud to represent this great city and all you wonderful citizens. I always say this is the city that chose me when I drove here back in 1996 under circumstances that were, I say, out of my control. It just pulled me here. But I'm great to be here. I'm so excited to work with our council, our new members, Mr. Tolan and Ms. Schmidt. Congratulations again. And I look forward to returning and working with Ms. Wilson, Mr. Estes, and Ms. McGrew. I say I don't really care for all this. It's really wonderful, but I love doing the work, and I look forward to that. So I invite you all to keep coming back to our meetings and stay engaged and stay involved. There's so much work to do. We have a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities. It's going to take all of us to make our realities come true of making Canton, Georgia the coolest small town in America. So I invite you along for the journey. I need your help. I need your support, continuing, and let's get to work. Thank you for giving me a second here to get situated. It's good to be back up here. It's a little odd to be in this seat, but we'll see if we can make this work. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to consider to approve the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve in a second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All members voted for a motion. At this point, I wanted to recognize our guests and visitors in the crowd. We have a lot of guests and visitors here tonight. Most importantly, our wonderful citizens who have showed up. But also we have some special people in the crowd. And I hope I don't miss anyone, but I want to recognize Sheriff Frank Reynolds, who is here from Cherokee County. Cherokee County Fire Chief Tim Prather. Cherokee County Commission Chairman Harry Johnston. State Representative Michael Caldwell. Woodstock City Councilman Colin Ake. Did I miss anyone else, any other elected officials that are here tonight? And I could have, so don't be shy. So if you are and I missed you, I apologize, but I appreciate you being here and I appreciate your support for all of us up here and for our great city. So you're lucky you came tonight because we have a few public hearings before our council meeting even begins. So since we have a couple new council members and a lot of citizens that are here tonight, I wanted to start out 2020. I thought it'd be appropriate to have our city manager remind us of the rules and procedures for our public hearings so that we are very clear about the processes and how these hearings are conducted. So at this point, I'd like to ask Mr. Peppers, would you please review the public hearing rules and procedures?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending our council meeting tonight. We have 4 items on the agenda, 4 cases that are public hearings. The first is Annexation 1910001, which is an annexation of property at 120 Roland Drive and 2041 Old Ball Ground Highway. We have case number Z1910001, which is a zoning of property at 120 Roland Drive and 2041 Old Ball Ground Highway. Those 2 hearings will be held simultaneously. Our third hearing is Master Plan 1911-001, which is an amendment for Great Sky Lot Holdings, LLC. And the fourth is Conditional Use Permit 1911-001, Apartments for Pod 16 at Great Sky. These hearings are recorded verbatim and become part of the legal record for the cases that are being discussed. As such, you are required to sign up and fill out an affidavit to speak during the public hearing process. The public hearing was advertised in the legal organ. It was noticed to the neighboring property owners under the Development Code via mail, and noticed to the public at large via those yellow public notice signs at the property or properties that are part of the case. The hearing will begin with a declaration of the mayor to open the public hearing, including the case number, description of the case, and then a summary by staff of any preceding hearings or actions on the case. Those wishing to speak in favor of the applicant, including the applicant, will be given the first opportunity to speak. They will have 10 minutes in total to speak on behalf of their position. Those in opposition will then be given a total of 10 minutes to speak on behalf of their position. Those in support may reserve time to rebut or comment on any of the opposition statements. Once all parties have spoken or the total time for each side has expired, the mayor will close the public hearing. And at that time, the city council will be free to discuss the case and question staff about that case. In the interest of all the parties and to give fairness to both sides, a timekeeper will be assigned to track the 10 minutes on each side. As there may be several speakers, we ask that you keep your comments concise and try not to duplicate the comments of other speakers. Please give your name and address for the record before you start your comments. Please address your comments to the council. The audience is asked to maintain decorum. Cheering, talking, jeering, or clapping during a public hearing process is just not appropriate. Those that cannot adhere to the guidelines may be called out of order by the mayor and escorted from the meeting. We've never had to do that, so let's not start tonight. The hearing process is a monologue. Council will not address your comments during the hearing time. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Peppers. We've not always kind of followed our rules and procedures throughout council hearings and meetings, but we're really going to try to start the year and the new decade off right by really adhering to the charter as we just sworn to do. And so we're going to try to do a better job of that going forward. And I'm going to try to do a job of adhering to those as well. So if I call you out of order, don't get your feelings hurt. That's just the way it is. So at this time, we'll begin with the public hearing and discussion of case AX 1910-001. Public hearing and discussion of case AX 1910-001 for Schottenkirk Real Estate, LLC, requesting to annex property located at 120 Roland Drive and 2041 Old Ground Highway, tax map 14N22, parcels 031 and 039A. We also have a public hearing discussion of case Z1910-001 for the rezoning of this property as well. Public hearing and discussion. So I think we have typically had one public hearing for these. Is that correct, Mr. Patton?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
So this is for Schottenkirk Real Estate, LLC, requesting GC, general commercial zoning for property located at 120 Roland Drive and 2041 Old Ball Ground Highway, tax map 14922, parcels 031 and 039A. Mr. Patton, will you please review this case with council, and then we'll open the public hearing.
Yes, sir. The Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing on the zoning portion of these two applications in December. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of GC general commercial zoning as the application requested. This is two pieces of property that sit between Ball Ground Highway and the end of Liberty Boulevard, where the automobile dealerships are located. Schottenkirk currently has a new automotive dealership under construction on some property that is already inside the city limits. They're requesting that these two parcels be annexed so that they can utilize this property to complete construction within what is already in the city limits associated with that new car dealership. They do propose to possibly extend Liberty Boulevard out to a second ingress-egress, if you will, on Ball Ground Highway. They do propose to have some of this new property associated with used car storage. I'm here to answer any questions that council has after the public hearing's closed.
Okay. And just to be clear, this is only for the annexation and rezoning. Neither of these cases involve the extension of Liberty Boulevard, correct?
That is correct. This is just annexation and zoning.
Okay. So we'll now open the public hearing on these cases, and Mr. Peppers will keep the time and call all the speakers based on the completed public hearing forms that were completed.
Is the applicant here? Thank you, Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, members of council. Congratulations to Mayor Grant, to the newly elected council members and returning council members. I appreciate that. My name is Benson Chambers, and I appreciate the opportunity to present to you Schottenkirk Real Estate LLC's request for annexation and also zoning. As indicated to you, Schottenkirk already owns a dealership that's been here for a number of years. They've been a partner here in the city of Canton with their Chrysler Dodge Jeep dealership. And they are proposing and currently have under construction a new car dealership, a Hyundai dealership, which they have located on property that they currently own, located at the end of Liberty Boulevard. They're at the cul-de-sac. That particular property is already in the city. It is currently zoned GC, as all the property is on Liberty. And they have purchased, already closed, on these two adjoining tracts, which lies between them and Highway 5, for purposes, three things that it means to them right now, and that is, number one, a little bit of flexibility. Number two, overflow parking, which is proposed as needed, and also the removal of the required 50-foot buffer between city property and county property. That buffer will then be moved to the side locations where county properties are located. This property consists of approximately 15 acres. It is currently inside the agreed upon growth boundaries between the city and also the county. It appears on the county's future land use plan as general commercial, which is a proper fit, as well as the county's future land use plan. The city's planning commission asked us to provide a drawing of a proposal of the extension of Liberty Boulevard over to Highway 5. You should see that in your package. That's certainly not the exact location where it would be. That would be determined by engineering. The state DOT, I believe, still has control over Highway 5 at that location and would also determine its location as well. We think this is a proper fit, certainly for that particular location. For the city, it requires fewer resources from the city and contributes back an awful lot. There would be approximately 70 new employees for this particular location, which then, of course, provide lots of extra tax dollars, both from the actual dealership as well as from those employees as they go shopping and purchase goods throughout the city. We would appreciate your consideration of this and your approval. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else who would like to speak in support of this case? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this case? Having none, we'll close the public hearing at this time, and I'll entertain council discussion of this case and questions. And I'd ask you to please address your questions to Mr. Patton. Ms. McGrew?
Mr. Patton, can we put some conditions on this for noise buffers for the residents who live nearby?
The Planning Commission did recommend a condition of a noise-reducing berm with landscape materials or a noise-reducing fence adjacent to Cherokee County property.
Thank you. Is my mic on? I was wondering if we could specify plants to not use, such as invasive species.
Our Unified Development Code in regards to landscape materials already has a restriction and a list of invasive species that the city would not allow to be utilized as a part of any landscaping.
Okay, and I don't think you'll know this, but I'm just curious. Will Hyundai also be renting cars?
That has not been divulged in any discussions that I've had. Excuse me, I'm dealing with a head cold.
I'm sorry. Hope it doesn't last
That
any
has
longer.
not come up in any discussions.
I was just curious. Thank you.
I have a question,
Mr.
Mr.
Toller.
Patton. The 15 acres that is proposed to be set aside for the overflow, is that going to include both the Hyundai dealership overflow as well as the existing Chrysler Dodge dealership overflow?
That would be up to Schottenkirk Real Estate. I would assume that they would allow overflow parking from the other dealerships in the general area. I think that they have some other long-term plans for additional development, but nothing at the present time.
Okay. And will that have an impact on if you're leaving Schottenkirk, the existing Schottenkirk, for instance, and you make a left heading back towards Riverstone Parkway, there are a number of, I'm assuming, for sale vehicles that are on the easement to the right. Maybe it's not the easement, but the property on the right of the road. Is there a plan to move those vehicles? There just seems to be perhaps a safety issue with having those there all the time.
Staff has notified code enforcement of those vehicles within the existing city right-of-way. Code enforcement, I think, is doing an investigation and following up, but staff has notified our code enforcement office of the encroachment of those vehicles within the existing right-of-way.
Thank you. Clearly, there's a need.
Ms. Schmidt?
For the overflow parking, do you know, are they building a parking lot, or are they going to be parking in like field grass area?
Any parking, the Unified Development Code specifies that it must be a hard surface, if you will, concrete or asphalt. So any overflow parking would have to meet that, or they would have to go through a variance procedure.
Okay. And did I understand that there's a creek on the property?
There is a creek between Ball Ground Highway and the end of Liberty Boulevard. The creek actually is closer to Old Ball Ground Road than the current end of Liberty Boulevard.
And would it be impacted in any way?
They have to provide a 150, 75-foot buffer either side of the stream. State regulations does allow for one parallel crossing of the creek, if you will. They can pipe up to 300 lineal feet of the stream for a perpendicular crossing of a roadway.
Thank you.
And just to confirm, any parking or other structures on the site would plans would be submitted to your office for approval. And
Correct.
I'd just like to point out that I believe the county has not opposed this.
That is correct. We, while I was out for the holidays, did receive from the county no objections to this annexation zoning. This property is within the growth boundary area that was agreed to between the city of Canton and Cherokee County a number of years ago.
okay. Ms. McGrew?
Thank you. Mr. Patton, how close will the parking be to the creek?
Won't know exactly until some site plans are submitted, but under regulations and guidelines, they've got to be a minimum of 75 feet away from the stream.
Will the runoff be diverted from the creek?
They will have to provide on-site stormwater retention, detention in accordance with city's rules, regulations, as well as DNR rules and regulations.
Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? Okay, we will make a decision at our next meeting on this case. So our next public hearing and discussion is of case MP 1911-001 for Great Sky Lot Holdings LLC to amend the master plan to move the number of units around within the various pods to reduce the lot widths within the various pods. Mr. Batten, would you provide an overview of this case, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, council members. This is a master plan amendment for the Great Sky development. Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing on this master plan amendment in December, on December 16th. Planning Commission did recommend approval of the master plan amendment. The amendment does propose to move around some of the lot numbers or densities within the various pods that are proposed for development within the overall Great Sky community. They also propose to reduce some of the lot widths. For instance, some of the pods under the current master plan reflect 90-foot wide lots. They're requesting some 70-foot wide lots. They're requesting some 50-foot lots, some 40-foot lots. They also have dropped multiple family from all of the pods with the exception of pod 16. They are specifying 2 pods that would be either single family detached or single family attached townhomes. This overall master plan does reflect a reduction of the total number of residential units currently approved by approximately 240 units. The number of apartments proposed with the next public hearing also was a reduction from what pod 16 would allow based upon the current master plan. I'm here to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Okay. We will now open the public hearing on this case, and Mr. Peppers will again keep the time and call all speakers based on the completed public hearing forms.
If I can use my phone too so I can keep an eye on it.
Mr.
The big
Huff?
clock. Is it going already?
You're on.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Parks Huff with the law firm of Sams Larkin and Huff. Sorry, firm changed recently. And I represent the applicant Land Ever in regards to this master plan amendment. And the subsequent case is also a conditional use permit, and those go hand in glove. I'm sure you're very familiar with the Great Sky community. It was approved in 2000, and a lot has happened since 2000. And approximately 2 years ago, after the community sat basically dormant, was held by a company that was holding it after the crash and basically was just a landholder. And Land Ever is an experienced master plan community developer, and they took the community, and their first steps were to come in and fix an amenity package that was closed, couldn't be used. The big clubhouse had mold, the pool, all these things had to be upgraded. And so they took time to first get that going, and then they started seeing what pods were available to get some sales going, and they've got some sales going in there. And they've also done a real good job of engaging the community. And I have a little PowerPoint. I don't know if it's up there or not, but it basically covers what you already know, is that the master plan community is in an area that has a lot of growth coming to it now. But when it was originally envisioned, it was the outer loop was going to be right there, and there was a lot of different proposals that were coming on. So what we've done, and one of the reasons why I want to show this slide presentation is because this is what has been shown to multiple meetings with the community. One thing that Land Ever did was when they took over the master plan community, once they kind of figured out what it all was, they also then started engaging the community, and then they engaged a land planner to come up with the best way to further the development, have it in moving it forward. And so they have met with the community, shared all this information, and I think you're going to hear some community support today. We have filed for a master plan amendment, and basically that is dated, my letter of intent is, and the master plan amendment dated September 2019 is the basic meat of that. And it does, as Mr. Patton said, it kind of moves some of the product around. And the big crux of it is that the pod 14 was slated to be a very intensive pod with multifamily approved in pod 14. And what Landever and the feedback that they got from their community and the feedback from their land planners and professionals and their professional judgment, they felt like that was not the best place for multifamily to be. And so the paired case with this is the conditional use permit, which is to approve the conditional use permit for the multifamily and Pod 16, where it was also approved. But at the same time, and again, hand in glove, we are asking the master plan amendment to give up the multifamily in Pod 14 and only asking it to be at Pod 16, which makes a lot of sense because it's the most appropriate location for it. And also, it just is what I think the community wanted. It's what the land planners felt was the best, and it's what Landever believes is the best way to develop the community. The other changes have to do with, things change. People grow and understand things differently. Wide lot widths are not the current way to develop, and there's multiple reasons for it. One of the reasons is people have realized that a huge side yard is nothing but a maintenance problem that doesn't provide them the benefit of a front yard and a backyard. And one of the things I like to say is that the level of required landscaping has gone up dramatically. You're supposed to have these manicured lawns. Well, a wide side yard, you can't manicure it really well, but it's not wide enough to be left natural. And so, the market does not embrace wide lots. From a development perspective, if you think this is approved for so many homes, if you have so many homes on wide lots on a street, that means your street has to be that much longer to be able to fit that number of homes in it. So from a development perspective, it makes very little sense to have a product that people do not want, a wide lot, when the development costs are so much higher with that perspective. And development has changed dramatically since 2000 in terms of stormwater management and how you have to capture the bypass drainage and treat it for water quality. And so that has increased how much grading and such you have to do with all development. So this revised master plan is a result of consultation with an experienced land planner on the best way to lay this out when you have the topo that we all know Canton has. And the first thing that you always get when you work in this area is it's the land planners look at a flat piece of paper and they think, we can put it on here. Well, you got a lot of topo. So the changes reflect the topography, and having variable lot width and being able to bring the lot width down allows the developer to be able to handle that topographical condition in a better way. So we think that we presented this to the Planning Commission. Your Planning Commission recommended approval of the application. We ask that you follow the Planning Commission recommendation. My client, Landever, has worked with the community, shared the proposal with the community, got their feedback on that, and will continue. And in fact, I think they have a town hall scheduled in the next couple of weeks. So to continue that dialogue, to make sure that they understand what the proposal is. But Landever is excited about moving Great Sky forward. One of the things it needs is a synergy of sales and getting product in there that the market is embracing, and that there's a certain velocity of sales that allows them to expand and build on that community that was envisioned in 2000. And so we ask that you follow that Plan Commission recommendation. I'm going to sit down now and let some other folks talk.
I have
time
yeah, he's got 3 minutes and 11 seconds left. I have 5 disclosure forms, so I'm going to call the name, and you let me know if you're wanting to speak in favor of or opposed to. That way we get you on the right timer. Captain Wood, Captain B.H. Wood. Are you speaking in favor or in opposition? Okay, all right. Then this is the appropriate 10 minutes for you.
All right, thank you.
If you'll just state your name and your address for us.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
Captain B.H. Wood. I'm at 452 Parkbrook Way. I'm part of the Great Sky community. And I have 2 short letters to enter into the record. You've already received them, and that's all I have to say. So I'll do this as fast as I can. Dear City Council and Mayor Bill Grant, I am writing you to request your consideration to approve 1911-001, and MP 1911-001 cases. As a resident of Great Sky, I believe it is in the best interest of the community in the long term to approve the work to complete the vision of Great Sky. Sadly, this community has sat incomplete for almost 2 decades. While I understand some of the reservations regarding adding apartments, I believe that the negative impact of an incomplete development has a longer-term negative effect on the Great Sky community property values. Additionally, Landever has taken the extra step of not including the proposed apartments within confines of the single-family homes, which does create some separation between the multifamily and single-family homes. Lastly, I am concerned that the city may not take into account the previously approved master plan. Denying the developer the opportunity to complete the master plan could result in a developer making decisions that serves interests of the developer and not the community. Unfortunately, the city and the developer are at a crossroads. I am of the opinion that we need to take a collaborative approach to resolving this issue for the sake of the Great Sky community. The homeowners of Great Sky cannot afford to go dormant for another 2 decades. Thank you for your consideration. Best regards, Lee Stafford. I don't have his address. And the second letter is, ladies and gentlemen, I first want to apologize that I could not join you this evening and wish you a very successful meeting. My name is Mick Fritz, and I live at 211 Daybreak Rush, Canton, with my wife, Caroline. I know many of you are already aware of the special place that Great Sky has become. For instance, we have 19 trees on our lot that we have seen 25 different species of birds, oh my Lord, in our backyard. We enjoy using our paddle boat on the beautiful reservoir. Landever has done an excellent job of keeping us informed of the expansion planning for the development. We are excited with our new mayor, look at that, huh? And implementing smart, organized growth of this wonderful town. We have lived here 4 years, and in my last email, I spoke to a friend that was considering moving here. So I want to end with saying that Canton has been the best place we have lived in for those 49 years, and we are looking forward to new growth in Great Sky and Canton. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Valerie Wood. Ms. Wood, you're speaking in favor. Is that correct? Speaking in favor? Is that...
I'm speaking in favor, yes.
We have a grand total of 15 seconds left. So
Okay, all right. Basically, I just want to explain that, of course, you're going to have people, you're not going to be able to please everybody in a community, but Landever has been very transparent, asking for our opinions, wanting our opinions, and I think they have made a lot of changes to make us happy, and still you're going to find people that are not happy, especially the fact that
Ms. Wood.
You can extend the time if
Yeah, we can, council, I believe, can vote to extend the time if you would like, if there were a motion.
Motion to extend 10 minutes.
Second.
Thank you.
Have a motion and a second.
let them vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All members vote in favor to extend the
Thank
public
you.
input by 10 minutes.
Especially the fact that they can make apartments inside of Great Sky, but they chose not to, that they decreased the amount of homes they're going to put in there. As far as the community outside the apartments, they changed that from over 1,000 down to like 800. And it's not even going to be part of Great Sky community. We're going to have a separate, as far as the pool and so on, because I know a lot of people in our community are concerned about being overgrown and not being able to get to the pool and the amenities and so on. So that is going to be a totally different complex. So I don't see why there should be any issues with that, actually. Also, and I do want to see the growth in our community. They just built 2 new houses on my street, and it's raising my value of my home. So the work that they approve and the builders they approve are basically top-notch, and I have not been unhappy with anything new that has been growing. That's it. Thank you.
David Frame. If you'll give us your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is David Frame. I live at 10740 Stroop Road in Roswell, Georgia. And I am a managing principal with Landover and one of the owners of Great Sky. Congratulations on the new council. When we bought Great Sky a little over 2 years ago, it came on the heels of our overall strategy in our company that post 2008, we bought a lot of very broken communities around the Southeast, in Texas and North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. Kelly Archer, who's here, basically took one of our communities, which is about 2,000 units in Charlotte, with 100 homes in it, and a bunch of disgruntled homeowners and a broken HOA and huge operating deficits. And in late 2017, it was given the honor of the #1 master plan community in the entire state of North Carolina. So in order to do that, and I say, I don't want to categorize Great Sky with some real broken ones that we ended up buying and then turning around, creating value for the homeowners association and everything else. It's all driven by sales. It's all driven by value creation. Great Sky wasn't broken. Great Sky was stagnant. It was owned by basically an investor, Bob Toll's company, Gibraltar Opportunity Fund, that they bought either the bank or the bank assets and ended up with Great Sky, which they held for a number of years. I'm not exactly sure how many that was, but at the end of the day, they decided it was time to sell. Those funds have closed-end lives. I don't know where it was at that point, but so we were approached and we bought it, and we have owned it now for a couple years. What we saw was somebody asked me why did you buy Great Sky? Why Canton? I was the project manager at Eagle Watch back in the 90s. I knew Cherokee County. I developed through that post-Olympics. So, for me, it was just logical. Canton was growing. We'd never done anything in Canton before. It was a great opportunity. It had infrastructure. Canton had a brand new hospital, had 2 Publix, one at each entrance, had a Home Depot, 2 Starbucks, and you can go on and on. And oh, by the way, it sits on a beautiful 500-acre lake. So, it was just logical that you had this core group of homeowners in there that had been there, a lot of them for a very long time, 500 plus homeowners in there. It had an HOA that was not real active because the previous developer chose not to keep it active and was basically using their declarant rights to, make whatever decisions they basically needed to make. Our view is to be collaborative, but it's also to look at the plan, understanding that, a plan that was approved in, 20 years ago, the market's totally different. I was in my 40s, viewed the world a lot differently than I do today. And so when you look at a plan that has 2,000 units in it, it's going to be one that kind of spans that whole spectrum of millennials, of young families with kids, young families with no kids, empty nesters, active adults. When I say active adult, I don't mean restricted, but people that are very active. They're retired. They love where they live. They're within a mile and a half of hundreds of thousands of square feet of retail. So the community just needed to be able to segment and stratify and meet the market demand. And we do a tremendous amount of focus groups. We do a tremendous amount of market research, as much empirical data as we can put together to say what is it, who is the market for one thing, and what is it that they want. And we don't just walk into a community and say, this is what we want, what builders can build what we want. We want to know what the consumer wants because, the old saying of, at the end of the day, nothing happens till somebody sells something. Well, if you don't put the right thing on the ground and you don't have the right product on the ground, you're not going to sell anything. And if you can't sell it, then things like HOAs, the community suffers. But if you can and you do it right, then all of a sudden now property values start moving, absorptions start moving. The one thing about Great Sky that's very interesting to me is there's not that many resales. There should be somewhere between 8 and 10% of the given total population of homes in there on the market at any one time. I don't think we've ever come close to 10%. So people really like living in there. And we've introduced 2 new products that we're getting ready to start on, and it's amazing the amount of people that have come out of older homes in Great Sky and have put their name on the list for different products that we're working on. So, we're viewing this as a community that we're going to move forward with, over many years, and it's not something that's going to happen in the next 15 months or 12 months. So, if you have any questions, please let me know. That's all. Did I make it?
Okay, thank you. I have 2 more. Robert Stellick, Mr. Stellick. It's against, okay. Larry Siegel. Mr. Siegel, are you speaking in favor? Okay, all right.
My wife and I, Joan, have been residents of Great Sky for the past 13 years. We moved up here from Alpharetta because of a number of reasons. One, the beauty, the serenity, access to services, very friendly community. We're very pleased to be here. We want to make sure that Great Sky continues that mold of what we enjoy now, what we like now. We're very pleased with what Landever has brought to the development since they've come in. They presented a plan that we feel very confident will continue to support the growth of Great Sky and provide the types of services and community that we need. The changing of the zoning from apartments to single-family home we see as a positive thing. It enhances the overall single-family part of Great Sky, and it puts the apartments in a different area. There's another issue, too, that we're concerned about, and that's traffic and that's safety on Reservoir Road. We understand that first of all, coming out of Great Sky down Reservoir Road, when you come down to the end, there's no traffic light, and at times that can be a very unsafe and difficult transition at that particular intersection. We understand that traffic lights have been approved, but it requires apparently state approval based on occupancy. The only way we can achieve an occupancy level that will get us traffic lights to improve that very hazardous safety situation is to make Great Sky more attractive, more amenable to the folks that would like to live in Great Sky. So the changes that Landever is making, and it will continue to make, we feel will enhance that and helpfully correct that traffic light situation that we see as very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anybody else who meant to sign up in favor? Okay. Mr. Stellick. I hope I pronounced that right. Close, maybe. You'll give us your name and address.
Yeah, I'm Robert or Bob Stellick. I live up in Great Sky. Been living here nearly all of my 60-some-odd years. And I herald everything that has been said so far. Landever has given us a really great opportunity here that we've been deceived and lied to for the last, I've lived up there for 15 years, and the previous owners just didn't have the same ambition, nor did they have the same understanding of the residents of that development. So hats off, Landever's doing a great job. That being said, there's a couple problems that I see about these 2 amendments that are being asked for. One is based on existing land, these pods, and the other one is based on the apartment complex. So there's 2 items here that we're talking about. I guess, do I talk about one of them?
Master plan at this time.
The master plan this time. Something I want you to consider about that master plan is that it was developed in 2000, actually started a lot has changed. I didn't have hair then either, but a lot has changed in the last 20 years. Particularly, if you look at that master plan, there was a mall there. There was the outer loop. So the consideration, I don't know what the council was smoking at that time, but the grandiose scheme of that area was to be like Town Center or Cumberland Mall, where there was going to be a lot of growth and a lot of opportunities in that area. A mall, wow, that would have been something. We didn't even have the lake then. Great Sky was barely built at that time. If you look at the master plan and you look at the roads and where these pods were, it's totally different now. So as the developer went in there, he had to make changes because the terrain is a lot more challenging than you expect. And again, Landever is taking a great approach to this and to this terrain and trying to adjust to it the best they can. But I want you to consider the fact that, of course, there wasn't a lake there. Great Sky was barely there. So the roads and the plans that were set out at that time weren't there. There was this huge mall. In 2000, the city was, about 8,400 people. 10 years later, we're 23,000 people. Well, that mall was never built. There's a school there. The lake's filled up, and now that boundaries have changed quite a bit because it was modified. So when you make this decision towards these pods, what I'm after, obviously, is, and a lot of residents are concerned with, is that we want to make sure the value of our homes keep growing. And I think Landever wants to do that as well. But when you look at these pods, and when I moved in, there was no, and again, we were deceived a lot, there was no plan at that time. Homes were going to be really nice. And what I'd like to see is I'd like to see some amendments to make sure that we encourage Landever to develop this property as single-family residence, but also look at the value that that lake gives. The original plan looked for docks and things like that. They're confining all of the homes into a smaller little area. And again, a lot of it has to do with the terrain, but I think, if you're creative enough, you can develop these pods on the lake to some very expensive and very nice homes, which will raise the value of our homes up significantly. So, if there's, I don't know if there's any little amendments that you can come up with, any attachments that you can come up with that, if you look at, what you have to look at is, that was a plan 20 years ago. Look at the plan that you've all agreed to for the next 20 years. That property is zoned, I think, or is required to be an SDA, suburban development area, which is 1 to 3 homes per acre, not 5, 10, 15 homes per acre. So look at what you're looking at in the future when you look at what they're asking for now. And if there's some sort of amendments that you can add in there. And you also got to think, we talked about sewage and water. If there were another 1,000 homes, we can't even handle the homes that we have now in that development, particularly with the sewage. The HOA rates have gone up. We have a separate one for the sewage because it's not adequate. The water, we're constantly sent these boil water alerts. So there's things that we have to watch out in that area. So development needs to be something that's done carefully. And I think Landever's doing a great job at it. But we need to keep a careful eye on them and look at the future as well, and look at where we're going to go and look at the 2040 plan as well. And I'll sit down until we get to the apartments. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all we have signed up.
Okay, at this point, we'll close the public hearing and entertain council discussion and questions on this case. And again, just to remind everyone, we'll limit discussion and questions on the master plan amendment case at this point time only. And we'll move on after this to the public hearing discussion of the conditional use permit case. So at this point, discussion and questions will be directed to Mr. Patton. And I want to start with Mr. Patton on the, I know it's the last time this case was discussed, there were some question or discrepancy about the total number of units built and the total number of units remaining according to the original master plan.
Well, the original master plan and the approval that Canton City Council gave to Great Sky was approval for 2,200 residential units. There was also language in the original approval that if the proposed outer perimeter did not go through and get built, that acreage that was part of Great Sky that would have been taken by the outer perimeter would revert back for residential. That allowed an increase to a maximum of 2,300 residential units in total for all of Great Sky.
Okay. Thank you. And then I know we're not talking about the pod 16, but I know the statement was made that multifamily was taken out of all the other pods, but then it was mentioned that townhomes were proposed for, I think, pod 14.
I believe so, 14, possibly 15 under the proposed new master plan as submitted.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but townhomes, according to our new CUP ordinance, are considered multifamily, correct?
That is correct. 3 attached units or more defined as multiple family. But as far as multiple family and apartments, because the original master plan had multiple pods that allowed for single family detached, single family attached, which is townhomes, and then multiple family, which was apartments. Some of those original pods that had all 3 of those types of residential development were developed by the original developer, single family detached. I don't have the original master plan in front of me, but I believe that there were possibly 6 pods that were designated for single family attached, or multiple family apartments. Some of those did get built and developed as single family detached. There were still pods that had not been developed that had the allowance for single family detached, and multiple family. The applicant is requesting that pod 14, if I'm not mistaken, pod 15, have the right to be developed as either single family detached or single family attached, which would be townhomes. If the developer does move forward with townhomes in those pods, they will have to come back before mayor and council for conditional use permit approval for anything that's 3 attached units or more.
Okay. I also noticed that proposed in pods 9, 10, 11, and 12, I believe it denotes age-targeted community. Could you explain?
Age targeted would be active adult and or senior. Would not necessarily be deed restrictions, if you will. It would be a market strategy. That's generally when a developer talks about age targeted. They are looking at a market strategy and a target for active adult seniors.
Okay, an active adult meaning ages?
Depends upon who you talk to. There are some folks that think 45 plus is active adult. There are others that think 55 plus is active adult. There are some, as I'm at the age, I think, active adult can be 65, 80.
Yeah, right.
Like I said, it depends upon who you talk to, but there are folks that look at active adult, and generally kind of an industry standard that I'm familiar with in regards to active adult is 55 plus.
Right. So, just call attention to that as we're considering, changing a master plan and addition of, hundreds of new homes. And if the intent is, for senior communities, considerations that, our senior tax exemption and, what impacts that could have going forward for the city. So, other questions at this time, comments? Mr. Estes?
I just have a reconciling question. So if the total is 2,300 and there's 928 that are either platted or prepared, that leaves 1,372, right?
Correct.
So
I'm not sure that the 900 is a correct number. I did a windshield survey, and I don't think I came up with that number.
Is it a lot lower?
It's a little bit lower than that. I came up with approximately 1,670 units remaining to be built.
Okay.
Some of those could be like the pod 18 duplexes that I did not factor in when I did the windshield survey, where that construction plans for that pod had been submitted, so there are 70 units there.
So I'm looking at the letter of intent, the master plan and letter of intent that was provided, and so it says that the amendment to the pods is going to go from 2,065 to 1,860, so it's a reduction of 249 units, but that's still above the 2,300.
And some of those numbers and all were based upon an older master plan prepared by another firm several years ago. Our office, our staff, as I'd indicated, about once a year go out and actually do a windshield survey, count every house. We keep a running tabulation of the number of units that are built within all of these larger master planned developments. Completed the last survey in November of this past year, and if I'm not mistaken, I came up with 1,679 units remaining to be built based off of that 2,300 total maximum.
Ms. Schmidt?
I have a couple of questions. I know that this is county, but do you happen to know if Teasley Middle School is already at capacity?
I do not have that information before me. I can certainly get that information for council prior to the next council meeting.
Thank you. While this master plan amendment reduces the number of units, is the developer willing, or has the developer talked about in any way traffic conditions specifically in and out of Teasley Middle School and left onto Reinhardt from Reservoir Drive?
Well, the intersection at Teasley Middle School has been targeted for signalization. The development, the apartments on the west side of Reservoir Drive actually provided $75,000 towards signalization of that intersection. That money is held in escrow by the city until such time that traffic warrants the installation of that signal. The same will be, if you will, a call for when traffic warrants signalization at Reservoir Drive and Reinhardt College Parkway. There will be signalization at that intersection as well. GDOT controls that intersection.
Correct. Thank you. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Do you know when the last traffic study was done on Reservoir Drive with either of those intersections?
There was a traffic study that was done, I think, in early 2019 or late 2018 with a proposal for some apartments on Riverstone master plan development property on the corner of Reservoir Drive and Reinhardt College Parkway. Like I said, I can't remember if it was the end of 2018. I believe it was 2019, though, when that conditional use permit master plan amendment came before City Council. Ended up being withdrawn, but there was a traffic study done at that time. It indicated Reservoir Drive had sufficient level of service to accommodate the apartments. It didn't look, if you will, in total, the last traffic study involving Great Sky was the original that went through the DRI review process in 2000.
So I would want to see if we could do a traffic study specifically on Reservoir Drive, and I would specifically want it to take place when school was in session and during school pickup and drop-off hours, if at all possible. Because, so if I'm understanding, it's been 20 years since the traffic study was done on Reservoir Drive.
Well, Reservoir Drive was part of the traffic study that was done with the apartments with the Riverstone property. It looked at more than just the immediate area in that intersection. It did look at Reservoir Drive. But City Council can certainly table these matters and request that the applicant submit a new traffic study.
I have a feeling that traffic study may have been done over the summer or over a school break, like spring break or winter break. So if we can maybe find that out.
It was done during the summer, but that traffic study added, I think it was 15% all of the traffic counts and traffic volume to accommodate, if you will, some of the school traffic associated with Reservoir Drive and the two intersections.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question for the changes to Pod 16 and I may have missed it in this packet, are there specific plans for preservation of green space since that would be on the water?
Yes, the site plan does reflect open space, common open space, green space within all of the pods of development. There is a protection zone around the reservoir. It's established at a certain elevation. It's not exactly 150 feet from the water's edge, but it's an approximate 150 feet. But there is a protection zone from development to the reservoir. And all of the pods do have open space proposed within them per the site plan.
Thank you.
I believe Mr. Peppers had a comment, and then Ms. McGrew.
I was just going to make a comment on the traffic study. One of the things that staff and I had talked about was the fact that I think we're about halfway done with that apartment project there on Reservoir Drive as it relates to certificates of occupancy on the buildings. We had suggested that they actually do the traffic study after those COs are in place. They've rented well, and so that'll give us a better description of the traffic that's actually in the area. And of course, if we have the study done, we'll make sure it's not done during the summer or spring break, as some companies like to do.
So the comment that was made during the public hearing that the traffic lights on Reservoir Drive had been approved is not correct, correct?
So
it's incorrect.
So there is a future signal to be at that location, but the Georgia Department of Transportation requires that a traffic warrant study show that the traffic at that particular intersection meet their requirements before they will move forward with that light. We will do the warrant study. We will have it done, but we're waiting until those COs are done because it's not based off of what will be coming through. It's based off of what is driving through the intersection. And so having that apartment complex completed will create more traffic as part of the warrant study with GDOT.
GDOT is the main intersection at Reinhardt and Reservoir.
Correct.
But the city, GDOT isn't involved in the Teasley Middle School intersection, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And we would do a warrant study on both of those at the same time.
Ms. McGrew?
Thank you. And to piggyback on the transportation conversation, with GDOT controlling the intersection at Reservoir and Reinhardt College, they would deal with the traffic light signal, like Mr. Peppers was saying. Are our state representatives aware of our growth spurt, and can we reach out to them to help us spur GDOT on to get some improvements made sooner than later?
Council can certainly reach out to the state legislators at any time you wish to reach out to them.
Absolutely. Would it be advantageous to come from city letterhead rather than Sandy McGrew letterhead?
It is always helpful.
Okay. Why are you laughing? To the point of reducing the lot lines from 50 to 40, what kind of house can be built on a 40-foot lot? Is this a cluster community where it's 0 lot lines?
There are some 2,500 to 3,000 square foot homes that are currently built on some 40 and 50 foot lots in the city of Canton up in Town Mill as well as Summerwalk. They're just built up, if you will, 2 stories, things of that nature. There are ways to get more than a 1,600 square foot home. You know, it depends upon how they grade, topo. Look at Slay at Laurel Canyon. Some of those homes, especially the ones with the basements, is well as the single story that are finished out or 3,000 square feet and such.
Does the city have any low limit on lot line, the UDC or our ordinances? Do we have a minimum lot line?
Well, we have setbacks in regards to side yard setbacks, front yard setbacks. Those are proposed within the master plan that you have in your packages.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, the side yard setbacks are going to be 5 feet.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Wilson. I just wanted to pick up on Ms. McGrew's comment about contacting our legislators. That's certainly appropriate. The DOT representative for District 9 that we're in, his name is Jeff Lewis, and he would be an appropriate person for us to contact about our growth here. He knows about our growth on 140 because I've talked to him lots of times.
Lewis or OUS?
Lewis, Jeff Lewis.
I think we should write him a letter.
I agree with the comment that was made that, the market conditions has changed since the original master plan was approved. But I also want to state that, Canton has changed a lot since that original master plan was approved, and we've discussed, on many occasions, issues involved with not only Great Sky, but the other master plans that were approved 20 years ago, and especially since the outer perimeter did not come to fruition. And I applaud the developer for trying to adjust the plan to accommodate the market and improve the development as a whole for all the residents. But I do, and I have to kind of question, Mr. Patton, can you remind me of our policy on, I believe, on master plans and our discussions of recent about master plans and requiring site plans? And I know we're talking about just kind of general, numbers here and all, but we have no, site plans to go by. I know we've discussed at some point, I think maybe we've had some
The City
master
Council
plans.
has had some general discussions in regards to requiring zonings and master plans to have a site-specific plan associated with that rezone or that master plan. By requiring that, it would require a new public hearing to make changes if it is a site-specific plan.
Okay. I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't. I just bring that up because I know we haven't discussed that. And if we are making changes to this master plan, this may be our opportunity to try to get it right. Mr. Dyer?
We did have those discussions, and just tossing this out as you think about it is we kind of ran into roadblocks in the details. Because then you start having to say what's going to be a change sufficient to have to come back to council, and what can, it cuts both ways. But it's certainly worth having that discussion and seeing if we can push through some of those roadblocks again. But there were just some insurmountable problems, I would say, in coming up with language.
Right. I mean, these certainly seem to be sufficient changes. So it's maybe an opportunity. Again, I'm just throwing out for council to consider. Because I do know recently, before I stepped down for council, we did have the developer bring, the changes to Pod 18 for the townhomes, and we went through that process and suggested, gave our feedback, and which the developer agreed to, and then later decided to build duplexes, I think, in that pod instead of the townhomes that we conditioned. So I just put that out there as something that I think in that case, if we'd had a site plan, maybe that could have been avoided. So again, just food for thought.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just an observation. The proposed apartments on both sides of Reservoir, number one, It's written, I forget exactly where, but I can pull that up if anybody has questions about it. That if such building causes undue strain on the infrastructure of a particular area, then it's not allowed that be done. That's number one. Number two, I appreciate all the eloquent speakers that came up and spoke in favor of moving the multifamily homes out of typical Great Sky onto Reservoir Drive. It has, to me, an air of not in my backyard, and I just think that we, as mayor and council, should consider, that as part of the decision-making process as we eventually get to that point.
And again, we'll be discussing the apartments and conditional use permit in the next hearing. So.
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. So we'll move on to the next and last public hearing for this evening. Public hearing discussion of case CUP 1911-001 for Great Sky Lot Holdings LLC, requesting approval for 798 apartments in Pod 16 at Great Sky. Mr. Patton, would you review this case with council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, council members. As you stated, this is a conditional use permit approval as it relates to Pod 16. Within Great Sky, Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing on December 16th in regards to the conditional use permit approval. Planning Commission did recommend approval of the conditional use permit. The application as filed breaks Pod 16 down into, if you will, 3 phases. Pod 16A-1 is proposed as 225 senior apartments, and that 16A is a part of Pod 16 that is between the reservoir and Reservoir Drive. 16A2 is proposed for 228 market rate apartments. No, that's, 16A2, 228. Pod 16B is the 228 market rate. 16A is 345 market rate, plus the 225 senior apartments. Total of 798 apartment units proposed. Under the existing master plan Pod 16, if the developer were to max build Pod 16 for apartments, the maximum number would be 1,040. So this is a reduction from the original master plan and what is proposed before you. I'm available to answer questions at the appropriate time at the end of the public hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Patton. At this point, we'll open the public hearing on this case, and Mr. Peppers, again, will keep time and call all speakers based on the completed public hearing forms.
Mr. Huff, if you'll state your name.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Parks Huff with the law firm of Sams, Larkin & Huff, and I represent Landever in regards to this conditional use permit application. As was pointed out in the previous application, Landever acquired the property that was previously developed, and they acquired the rights that development has. It was developed for 2,300 units. A lot of discussion in the comments and questions had to do with the infrastructure. It needs to be remembered that the infrastructure that's there they're all city roads, but they were built by the developer. And that developer built those roads and that infrastructure with the anticipation of the 2,300 units that were entitled there. They expended that monies. And so that's one of the things that in the road improvements that they built was based upon that. Landever, in Pod 18, I'm glad, Mr. Mayor, that you brought that up, because that's a great example of why I hope this is very different than that, in the sense that you had a lot of anger and a lot of frustration at that Pod 18 hearing. We don't have that today because my client made triple sure that they were able to effectively communicate with the community as to what they were proposing. And I think that what you have before you is an example of the effectiveness of that communication. The Other question that had to do was, well, you've got this many units in this pod, this many units in this pod. And one thing I want to say is that you do not ever want a developer who's developing this number of units to say, this is it and I'm done, I'm never going to think about it again. What they've come up with is a land development proposal with some flexibility built in so that pods can have different elements move from one to the other based upon market demand, based upon interest from buyers and developers and builders. Great example is the CUP for Pod 16. The land use plan, the master plan amendment has 830 something showing on that, but we're actually coming forward with 798. We're not maxing it out because that's not what the experienced developer for this multifamily development proposal believed was the best for that area. So you'll see that in the other pods, and that it may say a maximum of this, but it doesn't mean that that will be exactly what's there. But by the same token is, if you've got a product that is selling and is embraced by the community, then it will be able to be built at that, and then maybe you'll pull some density from one to that pod, and it has the ability to have that flexibility there. Unlike some of the other proposals, this does have an age-restricted product in it. I know it was mentioned that the taxes is an issue with age-restricted. Make sure you realize that rental pays full taxes. They don't have any exemption. There's no homestead exemption. There's no senior exemption. So actually, senior multifamily from that perspective is very good. And I will say I'm a huge advocate for senior housing. I always bristle when people talk about the impact on economics with it, because I think we also have a responsibility to provide housing for our seniors. And this is a product that is needed in the area and will be, I think, very successful. I appreciate Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Stellick. Probably mispronouncing his name. I hope not. But I appreciate him saying that, some conditions and such, we'll be glad to look at any conditions that would make him and make council more comfortable. We said from the beginning, and Mr. Frame did a good job of saying, we want to be collaborative. And your council person Schmidt, your comment about wanting some more data, I mean, I'd ask us to, what we can get to you or get to your city engineer that would be helpful to be able to argue to the state that signal improvement needs to be done now rather than later. Let us know how we can do that. We are here to be collaborative. One of the things that mentioned is the docks, and I assure you that we would love nothing better than to be able to better utilize the access to that lake and provide some either public and or Great Sky access to the lake with docks. It was on the original master plan, and I think that Mr. Hatabian will tell you that was a restriction from the state on the use of that as a water reservoir. We'd be glad to help the city revisit that to see if we can't use that great resource even better for us and for the city. So we are asking for this conditional use permit to be approved. The conditional use permit is for the multifamily in an appropriate location. I totally understand your comment about not in my backyard. I think that one of the proponents spoke very well when they said that one of the challenges of the multifamily sitting where it was proposed is it's right next to the amenity package. And do you do a separate amenity package? If it's right there, it's hard to say, well, this is yours, this is ours. But by having it on Reservoir Drive as proposed, it makes sense. And so that is one of the reasons why having the multifamily there rather than in Pod 14 made the most sense. And as I said, these two cases go hand in glove. My client, as a development purchaser of this development, they purchased the rights to the 2,300 units that were anticipated with the infrastructure improvements. And so we would like to have the master plan amendment and the conditional use permit to allow us to be able to have the multifamily built in an appropriate location by a very respected developer of multifamily with a mixture of product that will be something, and I think Mr. Peppers also said that the community that's under development right now and getting COs is leasing up well. There's demand. I do want to point out that you did a market study for rental units about 4 years ago, I believe, and that study did have this product. It had actually over more than, I think, twice the number of units designated as multifamily in Great Sky. And so to come in and say what we're asking for is a CUP for 798 units, I think is appropriate. We ask that you follow, the Planning Commission reviewed it and had recommended approval of the application for the multifamily CUP, and we ask that you follow that recommendation. We are here to be able to, be collaborative with the community, with the city. This is an important community, not just for us, but for the city as a whole. And we all want it to be successful. It was stated something about whether the developer will do what's in their interest. I always like to point out that their interests oftentimes align with the community's interest and the city's interest, and that when a builder comes forward and says, I want to build a product in this pod, they look for the builder that's paying them the most money for that pod. That's their interest. And so they are trying to position the community so that the pods have the most value in the marketplace, will have the appropriate synergy in terms of sale volume and that velocity that's needed to have the community vibrant, to have the resales and such. So we ask that you follow your Planning Commission recommendation for approval of the CUP. Glad to answer any questions you have. And I tried to answer some of the ones from before. If there's some, if I didn't, please ask me, and a follow-up on this one, I'll be glad to try to answer it. Thank you.
Was there anybody who signed up in favor of the first hearing on the case that wanted to speak in favor of the CUP? Okay. Was there anybody who wanted to speak in opposition that signed up? Mr. Stellick? Okay. If you'll just give us your name and address again. Thank you.
Thanks again for allowing me to speak. My name's Robert Stellick, live up in Great Sky. And again, Landover has done a great job. I'm very pleased that they've taken over ownership, and the improvements they've made are just fantastic in this residential community. Great job. Nothing that I'm about to say really is anything against Landover as much as it is against the city council and the infrastructure that we have to build, and the water, and the sewage that we have to look at. You added 512 apartments just recently, I read. Here's another 900 apartments that you want to add. We talked about the master plan, and then you brought the two together with the number of residents, 2,000 or so people coming out of Reservoir Drive. And again, I urge you or encourage you to look at that 2,000 plan. Look at that map. Look at the pods that they're talking about. There was no lake there. They were looking at an outer perimeter, 285. Put 285 in your mind and put Cumberland Mall in your mind. That's what they were looking at that time. The council was sitting there looking at, hey, what do we need? And Pod 16 was bordered right up against that outer perimeter, that highway, that interstate, 485, whatever we would have called it. So you have to give that some thought. And I think what you have to consider as you move forward in this is that master plan is old, it's outdated. It doesn't serve any purpose now. I think I heard some suggestions that maybe we need to think about really revising that master plan. I'm not really sure you can or what you can do. I think Landover is taking the best step forward to make the improvements that are necessary, but they're guided by this master plan, which is really ludicrous. It's really insane that you would even think that that was what we want to do with this property now, because there is no outer perimeter. And so there's some points that I wanted to bring up that really you need to add an amendment that this development can't go forward until the water and sewage that would be necessary to support that is in place, not planned. I don't want to see, oh, yeah, well, we plan to develop it. I mean, we've been hearing that for years. The development that we're in, we're having water and sewage problems there now. And it's a special kind of sewage system. It's not your normal sewage system. We have these things called grinder pumps that we have to pump our sewage to the sewer. So the terrain governs what goes in there. These apartments are right up against this new reservoir. And I did a study of the water quality there at one point. I think I sent it in. And, you know, the E. coli in that water was high, but that could be from runoff from the animals in that area. But you've got a 150-foot buffer, and you're putting in 570 on one side, homes, apartments, and you're going to have a tremendous amount of parking space, and you're going to have a tremendous amount of roofs that are going to collect the rain and all this runoff from the oils in the cars and from garbage sitting outside and everything else. You know, the water and sewage is extremely important. Make sure that it's in place. Make sure that it's in place, and then make sure that that runoff doesn't go into our drinking water, because that's our main source of water right there. It comes out of there, goes into the Etowah River. It also feeds Cobb County and Marietta. Maybe we should get their input on this, because what comes off of this Pod 16 will go into our water supply. So we need to make sure that we have enough restrictions in this amendment, or in what we agree to, that governs that. I think there was something else that was talked about, that was brought up, that kind of brought the two in together, and that was the traffic problem that's created there. Again, look at the master plan. There was no Reservoir Drive there. There was a mall there. There was this outer perimeter. There was no lake. There was no road. That reservoir, I'm not sure, that Reservoir Drive, I'm not sure when it went in. I think it was maybe about 10 years ago, to give us a second entrance into Great Sky, which I loved, because I live in the back end, and that windy roads and everything it made it much, much better. But we're talking, okay, 2,000 homes now that are going to go down that drive. We've got Teasley. We've got these HUD apartments that you put in on the right, and then there's another section. I understand they're thinking about developing that into apartments coming in there to Riverstone Parkway. It's a problem in the morning, and it's a problem in the afternoon when they let the school out during the school times, as we're looking at. It's, you know, there's a lot of traffic, you know, that bunches up at those times. And so something that we have to do, I think, as residents, is get with GDOT. I appreciate the name. That's a good name to get us to contact him, because, you know, when the school's not in place, you know, you can make the left and right-hand turn. The one thing I don't want to have to do, I still work for a living, unfortunately. I haven't gotten to that age yet that I can get retirement. So every morning and every evening, if I have to sit there at that light and wait for it to turn green when there's no traffic coming, you know, I'm hoping that GDOT can work around that. There is also a back entrance and exit that takes you out to 140, but that's another issue. Something else I'd like you to consider, not just with these apartments, but we talked about Teasley, which is a county school. I hope we don't use our resources from the city and my tax money to work putting something in that will support that county school. We need to work closely. I don't know if Commission Chair Johnson's still here, but hopefully we can work with the county and try to bring the funds together for that second traffic light, or whatever situation that we have to have there, where the apartments and Teasley come in, because that's something else that we're going to have to work with. But traffic is a good point, and putting in another 1,000 apartments that will feed down that road just is going to make it that much worse. So consider all these things, the utilities being the main thing, and be sure that they're in place before you give it a check mark and go ahead with it. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's all we had to sign up.
Okay. At this point, we'll close the public hearing and entertain discussion from the council on this case. A couple of things. I just wanted to, Mr. Patton, could you clarify a couple of things?
Mr. Grant,
yes.
The applicant had a minute left.
Okay.
If he would like to rebut.
Sure.
During the public hearing.
Do we need to reopen the public hearing? Yes. So we'll reopen the public hearing at this time and allow rebuttal.
Okay. You know, I appreciate the concerns about traffic, and we are certainly would affect us if traffic is bad for us, and so we'll be glad to work with the city in any way possible to make sure we're coordinating our traffic improvements and the infrastructure that we'll be doing with the proposed multifamily and the community as a whole, and be glad to do that. So I look forward to continuing to have that dialogue with the city, and my client does too. They're here long term. I mean, they're not going away. This is a a large community that will take multiple years to build out. And so they're here to work with you and the community. So thank you.
That's your time.
Down to the second.
So we'll reclose the public hearing. And again, we appreciate the efforts. We appreciate the offers of collaboration with the city. I think we all share the same goals. And Mr. Patton, I think in the presentation that came over late this afternoon to council, there was I think I saw a statement in there that the developer stated they felt that they were entitled to the CUP based on the previous master plan. Could you correct me if I'm wrong, though, that we did not have the CUP approval process at that time? We didn't have that until a couple years ago, right? Correct?
That is correct. The conditional use permit approval process for the multifamily was approved on March 16th, 2017 by City Council.
2017, March. And when did the developer acquire this property?
There was a recorded deed that had a date of April 28th, 2017.
Okay. So that was prior to, or after the council adopted the CUP?
Correct.
Approval process. Okay. And then I know I just kind of discussed, approving master plan amendments without site plans. I kind of think I even feel like even more strongly about considering a conditional use permit without a signed plan based on just number of apartments. I don't know that we have done that before. I may be wrong about that, but it seems like we've had a little bit more information before approving conditional use permit, especially when we're talking about 798 apartments. Again, I may be wrong on that, but it's important. Could you also clarify, or maybe Mr. Hatabian, on the subject of sewer capacity, and can you tell me if these apartments, the capacity for those are included in current capacity, or?
No, they're not.
So, okay. So that answers that question. So there's no capacity at this time for those apartments. So I'll have the moment. Other questions, discussion? Ms. Wilson?
I just wanted to clarify that before this conditional use permit came up, this pod or this area had been approved for 1,040 apartments, which could go forward if the reduction was not approved, provided there was sewer capacity.
Well, the original approval, if it was max developed for apartments, would have been 1,040 apartment units. Prior to March 16th, 2017, if the developer had submitted construction plans and if sewer capacity was available in 2017, it would have moved forward.
The other clarification I wanted to make in response to the gentleman talking about the runoff into the lake, we have some policies, or you have codes that would not allow that runoff. That would be something the city would be looking to make sure it did not happen, correct?
All the development has to do on-site stormwater management practices, as well as the state requires some stormwater management in regards to clean water. The reservoir was designed as a stormwater basin, and Great Sky was factored into capacity with the reservoir for stormwater, but all of it does have to go through a stormwater system that helps clean the water, takes oils and things of that nature out before it were to go into the reservoir.
So if the conditional use permit was approved tonight without seeing what the apartments look like or the site plan. When in the process then do we see what the apartments are like and what the site plan
City
actually is?
Council would not see what the apartments look like. There is an oversight committee, the mayor, myself, and another city staff member does review all of the commercial, office, industrial, as well as apartments in regards to our exterior building materials, colors, things of that nature. Basically, 50% plus of brick or stone is a part of the requirements that the Oversight Committee looks at, part of that review process.
And then it sounds like in this case, but just for clarification, the architecture of this then would match what's in Great Sky, even though it's outside of their community. It's supposed to feel like part of Great Sky?
I believe it would still have to go through some type of architectural review with the Great Sky HOA if they have an architectural review board similar to River Green, some of the other larger master planned communities. But the city does have an oversight committee that reviews prior to issuance of land disturbance permits.
And then could you talk about what problems the resident referred to that Great Sky might be having with their sewer and water? And when we get our new system in place, would those problems be taken care of?
Great Sky has a forced sanitary sewer system. Each residential unit, single-family detached home, has an individual grinder pump. All of the main sewer lines are like force main lines that go to a lift station, then gravities in through gravity to the Canton wastewater treatment plant. We do have very limited capacity with a wastewater treatment plant. The applicant would have to submit a letter to the city's utility engineer detailing the proposal. The engineer will respond back as to whether capacity is available or not. If it's not, they have to wait until capacity is available. I'm not aware of any water issues. Mr. Hatabian is going to do a presentation on sanitary sewer. He might could address any water, drinking water, potable water issues that he's aware of in the Great Sky community.
Thank you.
Mr. Patton, I know that multifamily apartment development is kind of very different from single family and even townhomes and duplexes. Do you know if it's Landover's intent to develop the apartments as well, or are they looking at another partner to develop that?
They have not indicated. I suspect that they will bring someone in that will actually develop the apartments as they're brought in single-family detached home builders.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Any other questions or discussion? Ms. McGrew.
Does Landover own Pod 16 at this time?
Yes.
And you think they're going to sell that to a developer or hire a builder? What is your
I suspect that they will bring in an apartment developer if council approves a conditional use permit to develop the apartments. Ultimately, it probably would be sold to that apartment developer, but the open space would remain part of the open space with the overall Great Sky community.
Okay. In the original plan, there was a third entrance to go out to Canton. Is that still in existence? Is that plan still?
In the original master plan, there was some language that talked about a third ingress egress that would actually cross the reservoir and come out Bluffs Parkway or Canton. The state nixed any idea of a roadway across a drinking water reservoir. The applicant is looking at a couple of options. I think they've acquired some additional property for a third emergency access on the north side that would come out on the Fate Con.
Reservoir Drive goes across the water. That was approved before they decided not to approve the third ingress egress.
The other roadway would have went a lot further across the reservoir. It would have crossed the main body of the reservoir.
It would have gone over more water, I see.
Yes.
Mr. Stellick mentioned that Great Sky has boil water often. I've not heard of that before. Can you give me more information about the boil?
I've not heard that. You could ask Mr. Hatabian. He's going to do a presentation on sanitary sewer, and he could address any water issues, boil water advisories relative to the Great Sky community when he comes up to talk about sanitary sewer. But I'm not aware of any wholesale boil water advisories.
Okay. Please address that, Mr. Hatabian, when you come up for your presentation. Mr. Peppers, Mr. Stellick mentioned the apartments were HUD. I don't recall that. Can you help me understand that financing?
So there was a sign that was placed on the Reservoir Grand Reserve project that listed a HUD identification number. The developer of that project has multiple projects that it builds nationally and has built some HUD-specific Section 8 or tax credit projects. And because they do some projects that are financed with HUD, any project they build, they have to list a HUD identification. Some of their other loans and guarantees are tied in with HUD. That particular project, if you go and you look at that HUD identification number, it lists the project as 100% market rate. So it doesn't have any tax incentives in it. It doesn't have any financing in it from HUD. It's just listed because it's part of that developer's total portfolio, and HUD wants to identify that developer's total portfolio.
Okay. I didn't recall any tax credits or Section 8 for that development. And Mr. Patton, chemical runoff from Great Sky into the reservoir, we're good on that? Our numbers are well within normal range?
That would be a question for Mr. Hatabian.
Okay. Now, with the apartments on Pod 16, that does seem like prime real estate. It's on the water, 16A. I would love to see something that would actually benefit the community much more than apartments such as community center, cultural arts center, botanical gardens. Can you enlighten me on the thinking of the owner who would rather build apartments than something that would actually benefit the community?
The master plan submittal, besides the apartments, does still specify the possibility of a hotel or convention center, but at the current time and the current market conditions, they've identified apartments. But Pod 16, if you go through the package, still does list hotel as well as a convention center, which was part of the original 2000 master plan.
It is zone C2?
All of the property for Great Sky is zoned planned development mixed use.
Okay. So that's pretty much anything goes.
Well, there are specific conditions of approval that run with each of the pods that were put in place in 2000. It was zone plan development. We changed things around slightly with the adoption of the Unified Development Code in 2014 and made subcategories of plan development. In the majority of the master plan developments, Laurel Canyon, Great Sky, Bluffs, all of those, as well as Canton Place where the hospital is, because because they are mixed use. They fit that subcategory.
Thank you. That's all I can think of right now.
I do have one question, Mr. Patton. As it relates to the proposed apartments, I know there would be some architectural standards, exterior. Are there standards that have been established for the interior of these apartments that have to be adhered to?
They have not indicated anything in regards to the interior of the apartments and the makeup. They've just indicated, market rate in senior apartments. I would say that any proposed apartments that were to be built there are going to have to match the interiors of their competitors just down the street and adjacent to them with the Grand Reserve. And the Grand Reserve has granite countertops. They have granite or marble floors in the kitchen, bathrooms. So, those are considered Class A apartments because of the interior upgrades as well as their community center that they have with a swim, tennis, sauna, meeting rooms, things of that nature. They did not indicate anything such as that, but being a former developer, you've got to match your competition, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
I think it gets back to my point of, especially on the conditional use permit, I'm not sure that the intent was, to take a parcel of land and, allow multifamily without a site plan or without, what type of apartments, if it fits, our need or whatever, but to allow, go ahead and grant conditional use permits so that the property could be sold, to another developer at the highest rate, just carte blanche. I think the intent was, if I understand it correctly, was, based on the project, the location, the type of apartments. We did the multifamily study, identifying the classes that we needed. But that's just my recollection.
It is a conditional use permit, so you can place conditions on that. So you could do it on this property. But if you're going to do that, we would need to think about what's the objective standard that you could put on it to achieve the goal, meaning you can't just say build Class A. That's not defined.
Right. Exactly. So it seems a little early to grant a permit, but again, it's just my thinking of it at the time. But again, even with the master plan amendments in Pod 16 would still allow for convention center, hotel.
If I'm not mistaken, that was still included within Pod 16 as a possibility for permitted use.
Okay. Sounds much more
I
attractive
don't have the
to
full
me.
package in front of me tonight. I'll verify that and get word back to council.
That'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Patton. At
Thank you.
this point, we will begin our actual work session agenda. So the next item on the agenda is to consideration to approve to approve the minutes, and we actually have no minutes to consider this evening. As the last council member meeting in December occurred on December 21st. Staff worked to send out agenda packets on December 22nd ahead of the holiday. So the minutes from December 21st and tonight's meeting will be considered for approval. Now we'll have our 10-minute public input. As with the public hearings, I'm going to ask Mr. Peppers to remind council and the public about the proper rules and procedures for public input. And afterward, I've asked him also to call the speakers to the podium that have signed up for comment tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for your interest in providing public input to the city. At this time, we ask that you address your comments to the city council. Only those who have signed up prior to the meeting for public input will be allowed to speak. There is a total of 10 minutes allotted for public input. Please keep your comments concise and non-repetitive to those other speakers. Public input should not include remarks that are disparaging to other citizens, elected officials, or staff. The public input portion of the meeting may not contain any discussion on specific zoning cases pending before the council. Those comments must be addressed in a properly advertised public hearing and are included in that case file. Public input is a monologue. Council will not address comments made during public input at this meeting. If council determines that a concern or issue that is brought up requires follow-up action, the item can be placed on a future agenda for further discussion or action. The first speaker I have is Mr. Thomas Weaver. If you'll give us your name and address.
Thank you, Mr. Peppers. My name is Thomas Weaver. I reside at 131 Old Marietta Road. First of all, I'd like to congratulate our new council. It's looking great new year, great new 4 years, so we continue to move forward in a new decade. 3 items on tonight's agenda caught my attention. Items B, C, and I under the section 12 of the agenda, and I'll address each one of them accordingly. You have to forgive the faux pas this meeting also, as I was not able to submit correspondence in regards to these matters over holidays. I didn't have access to the agenda materials until very late, so please excuse that. First, under the item B, the city is going to receive from Ms. Fitz information regarding the jail bookend procedures that are currently the police department and the sheriff's office currently use for municipal. I have a concern with that. And I know that it seems like it was a routine agreement. It's been done in years past. Why not again? Well, in looking over the agreement, looking at some of the definitions that are included therein as far as booking, it requires the sheriff and his deputies to use the Georgia-based offender tracking system and also for inclusion in the GCIC. And I think that there might be a statutory kerfuffle there because the offender-based tracking system is actually maintained Superior Court, Miss Patty Baker. That's not incumbent upon the municipal court. And municipal offenses for municipal inmates would not be filed through the Superior Court. It's not an indictment. It's not an accusation by the solicitor's office. It's a municipal accusation that's handled by Mr. Chambers internally within the city, not externally to a third party. So, and also looking over the rules under Chapter 140, Chapter 140, Section 2.03, as maintained by Director Reynolds on file with Secretary Raffensperger with the state. The GBI only accepts for inclusion under the GCIC for municipal arrest only for certain offenses outlined and delineated under Georgia 33. And those offenses, looking at them and cross-referencing to some of the offenses by Mr. Ingram this past November, when we reviewed our municipal bond schedule, a lot of those, the meat and potatoes of it's a lot of traffic offenses, which would normally not file or not go through the GCIC. Secondly, under item C of the agenda in regards to the probation, a lot of us like to talk about criminal justice reform. Indeed, looking at some of the conversations that I've had with some of the new incoming council members and also with others, there's a healthy interest in criminal justice reform, it seems, at least from the state level and hopefully here in the city. And I just question and wonder aloud exactly what kinds or types of offenses is our municipal court adjudicating to want to go through all of the different types of tracking systems. I know that if you think back a year or two in the past when we had the talks about the tag readers, there was a lot of interest there. And I know that we're not talking about people who are not been adjudicated of crimes. We're talking about people who have been adjudicated of crimes. But it's a concern none the same, and I'll be submitting more information to not only to the city's administration but also to yourselves when I CC that over to later, hopefully this weekend. And speaking of the city's administration, under item 12I regarding the statewide municipal aid disaster agreement or the municipal aid for the emergency management, I would respectfully ask that council include or consider amending that agreement to include a new paragraph citing Section 2-2, House Bill 60, the Georgia Safe Carry Protection Act that was ratified and enacted into law back in June 3rd of 2014, providing for and including language in that agreement to, I guess you could say, point out Georgia Code Section 35-3-37 in regards to the rights of firearms owners during emergency management agreements as required under the, well, not required, but as allowed under that amendment to the law. And then lastly, speaking about the city's administration, I think that it's incumbent upon all of you to know that I submitted the letter to Mr. Peppers and also through the clerk's office in regards to the recent federal development regarding Tobacco 21. And because we have conflicting ordinances and/or state codes in regards to that, it just kind of caught me as odd. And I do point out that not everything is preempted to the state. Indeed, under Section 12, Chapter 12A, Title 31 of Georgia's Health Code, the City Council retains authority to have cumulative ordinances that further, if that should be your will. And I just would ask that you take that into consideration, because there's a difference with some of our vendors and asking around town, especially a store I normally go to. I asked the other day, I said, how old do you have to be to buy tobacco here? And they're like, 18. I'm like, well, that's not the case. Or is it? It's just, it was an honest concern, and I had brought it to Mr. Pepper's attention, and the city apparently had stated to me that that matter was also being looked into. So I would ask that council consider that also. I know that's a lot to take in a short period of time. I promise I'll get all that to you in letters, and it'll be a lot. I just having to get it all out in 10 minutes is sometimes it's easier said than done, but trust me, you'll get the letters, and it'll all be explained to you, and I look forward to hearing what Ms. Fitz and Mr. Peppers have to share about that as we move forward in tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Question, Mr. Weaver. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vivian Rowland. I think she was here on one of the cases. Valerie Wood also spoke on a case. Captain Wood spoke on the case. Larry Siegel. And Mr. Stellix also gone. So that's all we have tonight.
Okay. Thank you. And again, we welcome public input, and we'll be working to engage citizens and get their feedback at every step along the way to inform every decision we make. That I'll be guided by that in everything that we do. And as we work to formulate our master plan for the city, as I said before, it will begin and end with citizen input. So thank you. Your input is very important to us. Next item is the consent agenda, and there are no items to consider for that tonight, as well as old business, since this is our work session. We'll move along to new business. And the first item is item A, discussion of proposal from T-Mobile to renew cell tower lease agreement. Chief Financial Officer Nathan Ingram.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Happy New Year. You have in front of you a proposal from T-Mobile to renew a cell phone tower agreement with the city. To give you a little bit of background on that, in 1999, the city of Canton went into an agreement with T-Mobile to put a cell tower on the Bryan Center tank on Hospital Circle. That agreement was in 5-year terms, renewable up to 4 times, total of 5 times, 25 years. That renewal expires in March of 2024. Yes, we just entered 2020. We're just getting a head start and a jump on these. But MD7, which is an authorized third party to negotiate the terms of the T-Mobile contract, has respectfully come to us and asked that we go ahead and start those proceedings. You have in front of you the copy of that agreement. I've got a couple of comments on that. One, I've asked them to correct the address, which they said they will do, but the copy you have in front of you does not reflect that. And item number 2, it gives an out. Unlike the original agreement that gave an out to the lessee, them, and the lessor, the city, their copy only gives an out every 5 years at renewal to the lessee. I have asked that they include some verbiage in there to give it to both. The individual from MD7 has relayed back to me that T-Mobile may not be receptive to that. So that's my only comment. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those. Maybe defer some legal questions to Mr. Dyer on, can we include that, or what if we don't?
We're going to talk tomorrow morning about
Yes.
it, right?
So let us know what you what you decide there. But it seems like that out is important, especially if they've granted it before. My question would be, why are they not granting it this time? And what is can you remind us of the amount of that lease? Is it monthly, yearly?
It is paid yearly. Right now, current year is just over $31,000 a year. They're going to renew it starting in 2024 at $36,000 and some change. I would also like to note that the Bryan Center tank is not used right now. It's not used, but my concern is, what's the city's desire going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years on that? And I don't want something that we do today to hold our hands or tie our hands on what may need to happen in 10 years. So that's my concern.
I totally agree. I mean, $36,000 a year is nice, but if we need that future for water storage tank or something of that nature, I think it could be a lot more valuable. But that's where I think the out for the city would be more important.
We have a lot of time to negotiate. So.
Any other questions, discussion? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ingram.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next item, item B, discussion of inmate housing agreement, municipal court clerk, Teresa Fitz.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
We're here to discuss the agreement for our inmate housing.
I'll help her out a little bit. So we currently have an agreement that was set up under Sheriff Roger Garrison. And the way the agreement reads is that the city provides 10% of our fines to the sheriff for jail operations. We provide that through Cherokee County. We can't give the money directly to the sheriff. We send it to the Board of Commissioners. Board of Commissioners then deals with the sheriff's budget. It also allows for the sheriff to bill a daily rate to the cities. The cities have never been billed a daily rate. Part of that is that the sheriff's department doesn't have in their software system a good ability to track what's city inmate versus what's county inmate or state inmate. Part of the issue is that, for instance, we may arrest someone on a state charge. When we turn that person over to the sheriff, they cease to be a municipal inmate. They become an inmate of the sheriff. And so, there's always been some question when somebody comes in as who they belong to. So up until recently, there's never been a charge to the city for a daily rate. This agreement continues to have us pay 10% of our fines to that fund, but it also provides that the sheriff will start instituting a daily rate, a per diem, of $35 a day for municipal inmates. It clarifies what a municipal inmate is. So if we, for instance, arrest an individual for a state violation like driving under the influence, we turn them in, they cease to be a city inmate, that's a state charge. So we don't pay for their incarceration. They are also giving us the first 24 hours that person is with them at no cost. Most of our inmates are going to check out within 24 hours. They're going to book out, bond out. There are some instances where somebody could be serving a jail sentence on a municipal charge, where we will have some costs associated. The Sheriff's Department sent us an initial bill, I think, in October for the month of October. It was just an example of what the billing would look like. That bill was like $6,700 a month, I think is what it was. After we went through on our end and looked at all the charges and removed all of those that are not municipal prisoners, municipal inmates that were on state charges, and after you take away the first 24 hours, the bill dropped substantially. So it's going to be somewhere on the order of about $2,000 a month, but a again, it's going to depend on what's going on in court and what's going on with those particular cases at the time. I will say this is the agreement that was sent to all of the cities, and all of the cities through their city attorneys met with the sheriff and the sheriff's staff to make changes to that agreement. The first 24 hours being free was one of the things that we were able to negotiate out. If we're going to have an agreement with the sheriff and it calls for us to pay a per diem, they're going to have to bill us. That's been one of the city's concerns all along, is that, you know, there was a comment through service delivery from the county manager that the cities had never paid for municipal inmates, and the city said, well, that's fine. We've never been billed for one either, you know. And so we're just working through that process with the sheriff. I know that there is a cost. If we have an inmate that's in jail, they do have to feed them, they have to house them, they have to provide uniforms for them. So there is a cost, and if there's a cost and everybody's paying it, we probably should pay our share of that. So this agreement, I think, is a really good compromise on that. Mr. Dyer may have more to add.
Understand, if you don't sign this agreement, the sheriff would be free to refuse to take our prisoners, and we'd have to find alternatives. There are alternatives, but every time it's easier to use the sheriff here. The biggest change was the old contract had a credit for this 10%, which is actually a state surcharge. It's added to every case we have. So we had a credit for that, and basically the sheriff said, I assume that credit's taking care of the daily charges. So that's the big change, is we're not getting a credit for that anymore. We pay that, and then we pay the $35 a day on top of it. I think all the cities have realized that it's probably going to be a fairly small amount. We are talking about people who can't bond out, that are in jail solely because of a municipal charge. There's very few of those people. Almost everybody bonds out. This was driven in large part because of a city of Woodstock urban camper who got arrested, who just refused to make bond. He just stayed in jail. And so you could have situations like that. That's what got the sheriff's attention, was this guy that was in there for urban camping.
The Woodstock should have paid his bail.
Well, you just bring him back to court and you just basically release him. I mean, at some point. And that's been one of the problems, as Mr. Pepper said, is tracking. For instance, they can get picked up on a failure to appear warrant that we've issued, and we don't necessarily even know about it right away. And so somebody sits there for a few days before we even realize they're there because of our warrant. But those are also very rare.
And I will mention that in my discussion with the sheriff, you know, I tried to get some clarification as to what happens when the thing we didn't expect to happen actually happens. So, you know, there could be a situation where our police department has pulled somebody over for a traffic citation, only to realize that they have an outstanding warrant from another jurisdiction. And we take them to jail. Are we paying for them at that point? And the sheriff said, look, you know, we're going to err on the side of the cities as it relates to cost. If there's a question, we'll eat the cost. We'll have to go through a year and make sure that's the way it actually works. So, but we'll be paying attention. We'll be getting monthly statements. We'll be cross-checking that with the charges and the sentencing in court. And then if we have a dispute, we'll send it back to them.
You mentioned the tracking issues and the lack of proper technology. Will the sheriff be using some of these funds to improve their technology? You mentioned the first bill and how inaccurate that was. I imagine that takes time from our team to reconcile, and that costs some additional labor. Are we expecting them to improve upon that so we don't?
The county is currently working on a technology upgrade for the jail, which will allow them to better track all of the inmates in there and the charges that they're in there for. It's not going to be in place when this agreement goes in place. So we are going to have some work for a few months until they get that set up. But ultimately, you know, as Mr. Dyer mentioned, our only other alternative would be if we don't want to house our inmates with the Cherokee County Sheriff's Department, we're going to have to identify another jail that we can send them to. You know, some cities will send them out of county. You know, we could contact Pickens County and see what their rate might be, or we could contact the city of Ackworth that has a jail and see what their rate might be. But then you get into transport and transport time and staff time for that. And so we just feel like it's probably a fair agreement. We're just going to have to look at the numbers for the first several months and keep a fine tipped pencil on them, you know.
And when is this scheduled to start? When did this agreement start?
So they were hoping to have everybody on board on January 1, and we didn't get the contract until, it wasn't finalized until the middle of last month, I think. And so they basically removed that date from it. What we would suggest is if the city's going to approve it, that we have it go into effect the start of the next calendar month. So if we approve it in January, we'll have it go into effect in February, which means we'll receive our first bill in March, and we'll have until April to remit the funds back to them. So there's enough time in there to work through.
No, we're not talking about a great deal of money, but that is money that was not in the 2020 budget. So where would that money come from?
We've got enough excess funds in
Municipal court. Okay. Any other questions or discussion?
Just real quick question, Mr. Peppers, how much of your staff time do you think it's going to take to reconcile monthly?
You know, between the first and second reports we got from them, they had done a lot of cleanup work. So, you know, I mean, it's going to take some time, but most of the stuff that's in there we're reconciling anyways. So it's not that, you know, a couple of hours of staff time.
It took an hour last time, the last statement you gave me.
Oh.
So I mean, it's not a significant amount, and hopefully when their software is in place, it'll be a lot easier for us to track, you know, with more standardized reports.
Thank you. Ms. Fitz is very efficient. So we'll move on and keep her up here for one more item: discussion of electronic monitoring services for probation.
Yes, sir. This is to keep people out of jail.
We're not paying $35.
Yeah, I mean, like, if they're in court and they're going to be sentenced to jail time, they can actually pay for this monitoring system and not have to go to jail. They're under house arrest. And we have a company that will come in and put on the tracking device, activate it. They pay per day of how many days they have to be on it. And the city's not out any money for jail time, and the person pays for everything. We don't do anything.
So is there a break-even proposition, or I guess since we're not paying for the jail time, this actually profit?
We could. If we install the monitors ourselves, they would give us the monitors, and we could charge less than what they're going to charge. They charge $75 to install. We could charge $50, and then it's $10 a day, and we could actually make money from installing these ourselves. They just provide us the equipment to use, and they do the tracking.
What's your recommendation, to have them do it or for us to do it?
I'd say have them start with, and then we could move into doing it ourselves.
Makes sense.
The only condition I have is that they not be allowed to register 110 Academy Street as their address while they're wearing the bracelets.
Who is we if we were doing it? Like, is it the court? Is it the police?
No, we have a probation officer who is going to start, I'm hoping we start her in March. She's here working now. But she's
I think I met her.
Yes. We got to get her up to snuff with the courts software and stuff first.
For the new council members, this is all new.
Yeah.
We just took in probation
Yes.
4 months ago and hadn't even been implemented yet. So these are all the adjuncts to doing that.
Okay.
Is providing an electronic monitoring service. Those are all normal probation services that we have never done before.
So, like, at her office, at that office?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
One other question as it relates to the equipment itself. I'm assuming this is just a one-time capital expenditure
We
per
don't pay
device?
for anything. This company provides us with everything. The city is not out any money whatsoever.
Okay, that's right, the inmate, or the
Yes, the defendant.
accused is going to be the one
The
footing the
defendant
bill.
pays for everything.
So there is no recurring cost.
No.
And do we know what the useful life of these devices is?
No, but I can find that out.
I'd be curious to know how long they last. And then if they break or they're cut off or whatever, will the provider provide us with replacements at no charge?
Yes, it's in the packet.
Okay. Obviously, I did not study that to the degree that I should have.
Oh, that's good.
And then, of course, there's additional fees and fines for breaking equipment, cutting off equipment. So it's in the best interest of the defendant to wear it.
Yes, and stay home.
Any further discussion?
I would mention one specific benefit to this system is related to the healthcare side. So if we have an individual who is in jail as an inmate, we have to provide the health cost associated with anything that occurs. If the person is at their home, then they're not on our dime as it relates to that health cost. So there's some additional potential savings there.
Makes sense. Great. Look at your plan.
Anything else?
That's all. You can breathe easy now. So you're supposed to be less nervous now. So we'll get there. We'll get you there. So thank you. So item D, discussion and recommendation for Etowah River Trail Extension, contract from Etowah River Park to just east of I-575 in the amount of $3,110,381.63 to Llewellyn Construction Company, Inc. Development Service Manager Bethany Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. So on December 12th, the city accepted bids for the Etowah Trail Extension project from the Etowah River Park to just east of I-575. This project includes approximately 3,300 linear feet of 10-foot concrete trail, as well as a elevated boardwalk overlooking the Etowah River. I did provide to you today the bid summary sheets, as well as a location map is on the very back that shows the layout of the trail as well as the alternatives. Staff does recommend award of this project to Llewellyn Construction in the amount of $3,110,381. I did not put it as a discussion item, but I did want to go over the alternatives to whether or not we wanted to add those to the contract if this were to be approved. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Can you discuss, I believe is this the one where there's also the natural trail? With
No, that's the next
Okay,
one, yeah.
okay. And just to clarify the funding for these trails, if I'm not mistaken, SPLOST and impact fees?
I'd propose that we take use of impact fees for the next item, because that is a new part, falls in line with the use of impact fee funds. And on this portion, we use the allocation of $6 million from this current SPLOST. The only caveat to that is, depending on the timing, we will need to pre-fund that use of other city funds to essentially make a loan to sales tax for a short-term loan of a year or two.
Okay. Mr. Estes.
Approximately how long would it take to complete?
I think we have the contract for 360 days for substantial completion, or 330 days for substantial completion, 360 for total.
And are there, regarding the additive, the additional items 1 through 4, are there any cost benefits by already having them out and them doing the work?
I believe that those were probably put into their estimates or their quotes, but I did not get that answer from them, I can definitely find that out.
That'd be good to know if we,
Mhm.
yeah, if the total is.
I don't, if I look at the, let me see, there is not a, in the alternative bids, there is not a number for mobilization, so I would assume that it probably is included. We didn't add time for the alternatives.
Okay.
I would make one comment about the alternates. Two of those are parking lots. I know that specifically when we had our major events down at the park, concerts this year, and have had other events, these parking lots are in areas where we currently park for major events, which is soft surface. Some of it's gravel as you get towards the kayak launch. The rest of it's a grassy area. It's not an issue when it's a dry event. So from that standpoint, I mean, generally speaking, there's plenty of parking down there, but as the trail improves and more use improves, there may be a demand for more parking in the future. I don't know that we would lose anything by holding off and getting the trail part done first and then maybe coming back and doing a parking project in the future. We did that at Heritage Park. We came back and added paving out there for parking. It wasn't a significant cost project for us. So I don't necessarily know that there's the urgency on the alternatives that there would be in moving forward with the project as a whole and getting that length of trail done.
My only comment or point was if it's 2.6 million to do it now because they already have everything there, and then they come back and say, well, now it's 4 because we got to re-engage a whole bunch of stuff, then that might be a consideration. But that's a good point.
Yeah, I would like to, I think I've seen those events where we have been parking on the grass and gravel. I imagine if it's a major rain event or something, we probably wouldn't be having a major event there, but I think it's worked okay. Maybe it's something we could look at later, so I think that the main intent is to get the trail done. So again, just to clarify, this is on the east side through the...
No, it's actually on the west side. It's just east of I-575. So it goes from Etowah River Park to just east of I-575. So just right on the other side of I-575.
So from like the loop or oval to the...
That's correct.
Correct.
And then the next one connects to that and all?
On Doss Road.
Okay.
Yes.
But those two connect?
Yes.
So those two together, the trail extensions, approximately how long would that extend the current trail?
So this part is 3,300 and the next part is 3,700. So I guess 7,000 linear feet.
I mean, what's that in miles? A little over a mile?
1.25. Yeah.
So that's quite a bit. I mean, our current one's probably
7 miles.
Half mile or less, or
7 mile loop, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. And you said 360 days, so we're looking at, if we did approve this, we're looking at that within a year?
Yes.
Okay. And you said the boardwalk overlooking the river, that is actually, my understanding, that is actually the trail that goes across the river, but it's built up to avoid the train right away, or is that correct?
It's basically
is that what that is?
A bridge, basically.
It's a bridge, and it's going to be up over. When you look down, you will see water. It won't.
Right.
You won't see the ground. It'll be.
It's a bridge, but it's
But
part
it
of
is
the
a bridge.
trail,
It's
right?
essentially
It's not just
a bridge. It's part of the trail.
It's not just an overlook to.
Yes. It's part of the trail.
Different surface, that's all.
Yes.
For beauty reasons, right? Correct. Okay. Awesome. Great.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a rookie question?
Certainly.
And I hope you get most of these out of the way early in the year. I understand the RFP process. I know how it works. Is low bidder the only, what considerations besides low bidder do you guys consider in making these decisions? Just
Well,
from my own curiosity.
So this was done as a bid, not a RFP, right? I mean, this was a bid.
Yes.
So there's a difference between RFP and bid.
Okay.
So we put it out there and said, tell us how much it'll cost. we are required by law to accept the lowest qualified bidder. So what happened here was one bidder was disqualified for whatever reason. I didn't catch the reason, but so we would be required to take the low bidder that's qualified.
Got it.
And in this case, the lowest bidder on the project left a significant amount of the project out of their bid proposal. They had an incomplete bid. And so they were significantly less, but didn't complete the packet correctly. So we disqualified that bidder and went with the next lowest bidder, which was
That
allowed.
bid writer no longer has a
Did
job.
did we pre-qualify here?
No, we did
So,
not.
so that we would also go through a process of making sure the contractors are capable of doing the work, and that would be a basis for rejecting a bid as well. The RFPs, generally, you have a little more freedom to negotiate, perhaps. They bring proposals, and then you have the ability to accept the low bid and negotiate. With the bids, it's pretty much, you either have to reject them all or you have to take the low one.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, the next item, which we've kind of talked about, but discussion of recommendation of Etowah River Trail Extension contract from just east of I-75 to Doss Road to the amount of $1,625,475 to A1 Contraction LLC.
It should be contract.
Okay.
Not contraction.
I'm glad that wasn't me. So.
That one on Annie,
Okay.
even though it wasn't her.
So again, that just goes from where the previous one ends to Doss Road, which is that the city limits?
It goes to the train trestle.
Yeah,
Train
so
trestle.
it doesn't actually go all the way up to Doss Road. It's just adjacent to Doss Road. At the end, there will be a gazebo, and this project also has the Land Water Conservation Fund grant tied to it for $100,000.
$100,000.
This project, substantial completion is 270 days. The Land Water Conservation Fund is supposed to be completed by December 31st of this year. So we are a little bit more in a time crunch for this project.
Okay. So just to be clear, so we're talking about, and Mr. Ingham, I think you said the funding for both you recommend for this one would come from
Impact fees.
From impact fees. So we're talking about tripling the length or a little bit more than our existing trail, and it'd be covered by impact fees and current SPLOST, and we would, if we vote to approve these two items, have that trail completed by the end of this year. Sounds good. Awesome. Any other discussion? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, item F, moving right along. Discussion of right-of-way abandonment for an alley off Scott Mill Road. Community Development Director Ken Patton.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, council members. One of the property owners came before City Council in August of last year and requested City Council consider abandonment of the alley. This is the alley that's between the cemetery and 3 residential properties. We have notified the property owners of tonight's meeting in regards to abandonment of this alley. The discussion in August, council really didn't seem to have much of an issue or a problem, but never instructed it to move forward. The inquiry was made again, so we put it on the agenda.
Okay.
And just so you'll know, the city has already abandoned a portion of this alley, and so this would just be abandoning the rest of it.
And again, this alley, if I remember, doesn't really connect to anything, or is a possibility to connect to anything. I think way back.
On paper, it connects to to
140 Hickory Flat.
Way down.
Off a cliff.
Off the cliff.
Have a lot of alleys
But
on
if you look at the paper,
that-
it does connect.
Yes, okay. Okay.
Mr. Cavanagh, the person that brought the plat to us.
Mr. Cavanagh was in the audience and in attendance, but his attorney, Benson Chambers, presented this matter when it came to City Council this past August. And Mr. Cavanagh is one of the 3 property owners involved with the abandonment of the alley.
And the portion that was previously abandoned, was that to the same?
No, it's to Mr. Escobar.
He's the third
He's the one in the
party.
back.
Okay, that's the one I remember.
His house actually encroached into the alley, and so the city abandoned it.
Okay.
To make his house.
So we already
his
have kind
property.
of a precedent for, okay.
It only services those 3 properties. It doesn't. It doesn't.
Any further discussion? Okay. Item G, discussion of right-of-way abandonment for Cochrane Lane. Mr. Dyer.
Yeah, and I apologize in advance. I got caught up in the holiday and never did actually communicate with Mr. Patton about this one, and he reminded me today that we've already abandoned Cochrane Lane. So Cochrane Lane is the driveway off of Knoxbridge Highway that services the 2 businesses there, the auto muffler shop or whatever it is, and it's a paved concrete driveway. It doesn't even look like a road. It was a county road. The county actually took deeds to the road but never built it. And then when we annexed in, we annexed both sides and it became a city road. So what we'll do at the next meeting is just to ask for a deed. One of the property owners has asked that the property be deeded back. The county deeded some property back to one of the property owners, but refused to do this one. So it came to me, and then I just sort of got caught up in agenda deadlines and never did communicate with Mr. Patton. So I apologize for that, but we can still vote on the deed to the property owner.
So that current drive that is paved was paid by the property owners there, not the
It's a
city?
driveway. It does not look, it's concrete. It's not a road at all. We don't want to mess with it.
Yep.
We need to run from it.
Sounds good. Okay, item H, wastewater project update, capacity chart, utility engineer Dave Hatabian. You're up.
Okay, the hot topic for 2020, wastewater capacity. I'll give you an update of where we stand with our treatment plant project. We have 50% plans submitted, I think, in November. Ultimately, we're going to looking at 90% plans sometime in March, April. The consultant has given us a couple of options to accelerate the construction schedule. One of them looks very favorable. Without getting into all the details, but we've got to build a lot more tanks at the site. And we're looking at a company that's going to use pre-stressed or precast pre-stressed panels, very similar to like we're looking at the parking deck. They have submitted a proposal. They're also a licensed contractor, the company that we were looking at. And they can start work on those relatively soon, and we can get all our tanks or a major portion of our tankage done within, I think it was 4 months. But it would be, obviously we'd have to enter into a contract with this company. It's about a $1.25 million savings over a traditional cast-in-place concrete. But looking at it, I think it's a pretty good option to pursue, given our constraint with capacity and the ability to accelerate the construction schedule on this project. They got a few other little other ones that we can look at that aren't as critical, but this one is something that we could start almost immediately. The other thing that they have mentioned is that in their construction sequencing plan, they have the ability to get our hydraulic capacity up to 6 million gallons a day within 2 years. But that doesn't address all the solids handling and everything like that. We would have to work with EPD to see if they will buy into giving us the permit to discharge more than our 4 MGD. So that's in the works as well. capacity issues. When everything was coming up, our capacity ordinance, we looked at all the permits that we had received and compiled this list, and I think that's attached to your packet. Basically, it lists everything that we've got in-house now and others that we have identified as, yes, we want to make sure we get these covered. And looking at historical data and when we think these things are going to come online, we've kind of projected out as when we think all these projects will affect our system. So it's kind of a crapshoot as to when everything's going to happen. It's our best guess right now. It also assumes that our current flows maintain the way they are right now. History shows that our flows at the plant will have a tendency to go up between now and March or April, and then they may go down a little bit. So that's available capacity is kind of a moving target anyway. So, but the other thing, going back to the plant, we're looking at hopefully advertising this for construction maybe July of next year, or this year actually, and it would probably be on the streets for a couple of months. So maybe September we'd start construction. They are estimating about a 42-month construction period right now, based on the tight site, the very sequencing of events that has to go into play to make this thing work and still keep the current plant operational. Moving forward with this other project will help, I would think, significantly in reducing that time frame. But that's kind of where we are right now.
So the other project, the precast
Yes.
tanks, and did you say that reducing by? Did you say 4
It
months?
would save what they gave me as an estimate. It would save about $1.2 million.
And how much time?
They said here they can design. 2 weeks to set the walls and 4 months to finalize.
Okay.
So maybe within 6 months you'd have all your tanks done.
I mean, obviously, there's no bigger challenge that this council will face than our water and sewer needs and systems. And I know we're prepared to do that. I know we'll be retreating in just a few weeks, and I know this will be a big topic on the retreat. We intend to tackle that and determine the path forward. And make some decisions so we can move as quickly and responsibly as possible, and determine, how to figure this out. I mean, I think, our goal is to kind of create a master plan, but how we want the city to grow. And I think this capacity limits at this moment gives us a natural pause to give us some time to do that. My concern has been, to not, give away the capacity that we're building, so that when we're done in the expansion, the capacity is already gone again, right. And it may not be something that fits our new plan. So I think those are the things that we need to discuss and discuss beyond this expansion, what may be needed beyond that. So there's
I know
so many things to consider. It's a complex puzzle that we're going to have.
I think our master plan that was completed at the end of 2018 showed 6 MGD would take us beyond 2040, if I remember right. I don't know how much more going to continue to grow at the rate it's growing, but that's
2040 is starting to look a lot closer than it sounded in 2018 all of a sudden. I think
the other thing that we're also going to look into, and something that you mentioned earlier, we are going to pre-qualify contractors for this project. We'll have an RFP set out or RFQ for contractors to submit on this. So you'll have to be pre-qualified to bid on this job.
I'll be talking in my report about some primary council committees, and water and sewer will be one of them. And certainly that'll be an effort to place more attention on this matter. And again, there's so much to discuss and consider on this, but we're going to dedicate ourselves to figuring it out and getting it done and moving forward as responsibly and efficiently and cost effectively as possible. So we'll be looking for you to help guide us those efforts. So questions, Ms. McGrew?
No, I'm going to address her question on the water issues in Great Sky. As far as any boil water, I said, I don't know of any boil water advisories we've had.
We haven't had one up there in at least 2 years that I'm aware of.
The only issues we do have is occasionally there's low pressure, but
no boil warnings.
No.
I hadn't seen any, and I just wondered if maybe they'd escaped me. But no.
We had, if I recall, I think we had about 3 boil water advisories in the city within about a 7 or 8 month period in one particular year.
They were downtown, weren't they?
One of them was, but one of them was that whole northern section of the city, and we haven't had one in a while. So,
And purity of the reservoir. How often do you test the water?
Well, we actually send out water quality samples every month, but we are only sampling for nitrates, nitrites. I forget what else. There's three items that we sample for, and we sample downstream of the dam, upstream of the Hickory Log Creek confluence with the Etowah, and then also at the water plant.
You don't test for phosphates and potassium?
Phosphorus, maybe, I can't remember what was, but, the typical constituents on a water quality like at a water plant, no, we don't do all that.
And I think Mr. Stellick mentioned E. coli?
No.
No. Do you remember when we first got on council, we voted to stock the reservoir for food for fish there?
Mm-hmm.
Do our fish have enough food?
As far as I know, they do.
Because it's been 6 years. And, you came to us and you asked us to buy small fish to feed the other
shad,
fish.
I think is what they were called. I'm not a fisherman, so I don't just know.
we did that again 2 or 3 years ago. We had another shipment come.
Did we? I can't, yeah. We did it. We've done it, I know, at least once, maybe twice.
Okay. So that's not something that has to come before council anymore?
No.
Good. Thank you.
Well, I know this was discussed at previous meetings when, capacity issues were identified recently. And Mr. Patton had mentioned, his experiences with a couple other municipalities. But I guess in your assessments with our capacity issues and development and expansion and time frame, is that something highly unusual from cities in our area? Is it something that typically dealing with?
It's not unusual. It's one of those items that nobody wants to spend the money to do it, but ultimately you're going to have to. I think what makes this situation a little more unique is there's so much development going on so quickly that you can't really grab your hands around it. So it is what it is, and I'm sure we can get through it. But it's certainly not unusual to say, well, we'll get that next year. We'll get that next year.
And I think it goes back to the master plan and getting in front of that development and making sure it's the development that we want for the city and not vice versa.
I point out there's 7 projects that were not even included in this study, and that's not even talking about the ones we talked about tonight.
Right. So again, we have a lot to consider, and it's going to require a lot of political will and some good planning here. So look forward to the discussions and figuring this out.
I know it. Then we'll have to start talking about water instead of wastewater.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So item I, discussion of statewide mutual aid agreement. Mr. Peppers.
This is just an annual agreement that we do with Cherokee County Emergency Management. It just allows us to work across municipal, county boundaries as it relates to natural disasters. We approve it every year. It's just a standard agreement with them.
Same ones we've done in the past, correct?
That's correct.
And item J, discussion of 2020 council meeting dates. Mr. Peppers.
We did not see any conflicts with the calendar and any holidays. So what you have before you are the list of dates by each month for the first and third Thursdays.
Is there any, my only consideration was July has, I think, 5 Thursdays. And, I mean, it goes against the first and third, but with the second and fourth, was there any consideration there?
No, and that is a good question. The only time we really get into an issue on it, if we know now that the plan would be to move the July meeting from the week of the 4th to the following week, if we want to shift them both or just shift one and do them back, it's easier if we shift them both. But we just need to know that as it relates to setting up the calendar for public hearings for the planning process, and also for setting up the calendar as it relates to the budget for the budget process. It's not a problem if that's what you want to do. I noted myself that I think this is the first year since I've been here that the April meeting doesn't fall during spring break. So, we've kind of shifted one there. So, if council did want to consider moving the 2 July meetings back to the 2nd and 4th Thursdays, we could definitely do that.
But I think the February break, if I'm not mistaken, does fall. Our council meeting does fall in the February break.
The February break does. The September break does not this year, but it has in the past. So we usually catch either the February or the spring break on one end or the other. So,
Unfortunately, we can't plan around everything, but we need to let our citizens know what to expect, when we're going to be meeting. But if there is something that we want to consider, like the July, if you guys want to think about that, we can discuss it the next meeting. But as Mr. Pepper says, it's not just our changing our meetings, it's changing, shifting a lot of things. So something to consider. So, okay, Mr. Peppers, you give us your report, please.
I have 3 items for you tonight. The first is an annual tradition where I get to appoint an acting city manager should I become incapacitated for a period of 14 days. And I would like to nominate Mr. Ingram again for a 5th consecutive year to be the acting city manager, and hope that he doesn't have to take that role on. But I did need to let you know of that. Second item is related to service delivery. I have put before you a copy of a resolution. The cities of Holly Springs and Woodstock and Canton have had some discussions about how to move the topic of service delivery forward. And so what you have before you is basically the city's approach to what we think is the best practice of doing that. And that would be that each of the cities appoint 2 council members to be their conferees or their delegates to negotiating a solution to service delivery. It also calls for the county to appoint 2 post commissioners to also be delegates. Right now, if we have conversations on service delivery, it's either staff or certain elected officials, and so it's kind of hard to gauge the success of a document until you know that you've got two people who are representing the will of the council. And so that's really the first step that's outlined in here. The second step that's outlined in here is that there would be a series of 3 public meetings for discussion of topics that tend to be the heart of the service delivery dispute between the cities and the county. And so what we are outlining is that one of those meetings would be held in Woodstock, one would be held in Canton, and then one would be held at a county location for the county to decide. One of those meetings is based on parks and recreation. One is based on roadways and stormwater, and then the other is based on what the law requires, which is a special service district when there is a debate, and then, of course, the source and use of certain funds. What we're asking is that the cities consider approving the resolution. So Canton would approve theirs on the 16th. As part of that approval process, there would be 2 named council members that would be our conferees for that process. It sets forth the dates of meetings. It also sets forth some rules as it relates to how we're going to conduct those meetings. They're going to be public meetings. They're meetings to be discussed between those delegates. It's not meant to be an opportunity for attorneys to give opinions, and fight back and forth in a meeting. It is for group discussion, so that we can be transparent with the issues that we have in service delivery. What the goal is that each of the cities will approve the resolution this month. We will turn around and submit a copy of all of the signed resolutions along with a letter that's signed by the mayors of those cities to the county so that the county can then agree to our terms for negotiation in this process. If they don't, then the cities will need to determine what the next step is. But our hope is this public discussion of what we consider to be the service delivery issues and what they have identified as the major issues can take place. If you will recall, back in October, the cities did approve a copy of Form 2s, which outline which services are being provided and how they're funded in the county. We submitted that to the county. They submitted it back to us with their comments at the end of November. The city managers sat down with the Form 2s and the comments from rebutted with additional comments or concerns. Either, for instance, they may take what we had separated into multiple Form 2s and tried to combine them into one Form 2. We turned around and explained to them why that wouldn't work, at least from the city's perspective. So that information was submitted back to the county last week. So those are what we would consider to be the minor issues on service delivery. These meetings would deal with those major issues. Our hope is that, by the end of April, that we would have gone through all of the minor issues and all of the major issues so that we can come up with an agreement that everybody can sign off on and move us forward on service delivery. I'm happy to read the resolution word for word if you would like, but I have given you a copy of it.
I just add further to that, since Ms. Wilson and I were able to attend and with Woodstock and Holly Springs, as well as Mr. Peppers and their city managers. And I think, what the public may not recognize is that, after October 31st, the county and the cities are no longer in the qualified status, which means certain funding cannot occur. I think depending on the city or the county, it has a greater impact than others. And I think regardless of the extent, I think just overall, it's just not a good practice to be unqualified. And so, certainly see this as an opportunity to, put the olive branch out there to continue the dialogue. A lot of the concerns, and I like the rules of engagement were kind of outlined here because, didn't want it to become a, jockeying of attorneys' feedback per se, no offense, but more, but, just truly getting it back down to, the transparency and truly having the elected officials speak on behalf of what their constituents want. And I think candidly, depending on the community or the whoever it is, there is a lot of old political, warmanship going on. And personally, I don't really care. I just, I think I look at it as that we're members of the county and the cities, and to be unqualified just does no one any good today or into the future. So figuring out how do we push this along and come up with an agreement, because it sounds like 10 years ago it wasn't done as thoughtfully and it was pushed along, and so now we've got some time to really agree on what the next 10 years look like.
Yeah, and I want to thank Mr. Estes and Mrs. Wilson and Mr. Peppers for investing the time in these meetings and coming up with this resolution. I think it's a great plan. I really, appreciate the public meetings and the transparency that is offered in this resolution, and I certainly hope that the county will appreciate that as well, and I hope we'll be able to move this along and get this matter settled quickly and as efficiently as possible and as openly as possible. So I think it's in everyone's best interest that we do that. So I'm hoping that this resolution, I hope the other cities will agree as well and adopt this month. So I've talked to a couple that seem to approve of it. So I'm hoping that we can move this forward. So get this settled. So thank you for your efforts.
The only other thing that I had to mention is that, and I sent you an email about this earlier today, we did finalize the dates for the mayor and council retreat. Tuesday, February the 4th, and Wednesday, February the 5th. We will be retreating in Rome, Georgia, at the Hawthorne Suites in their downtown. They have a boardroom there. That'll be where our retreat will take place. Once the agenda is finalized, we'll get that published and get it noted to the public, so everybody will know what we're retreating and discussing for those 2 days. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Peppers. Appreciate it. Okay, time for my report, and I got a few things. Since it's my first, I've tried to limit it to the things that...
Bill, you skipped one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can't introduce items. I'm sorry. We have one bottle fillers at city water fountains. Ms. Schmidt.
It's really Mr. Peppers. I just asked to have this added to the agenda because it's something that I talked about when I campaigned. It's relatively simple as far as these things go. So Mr. Peppers got some pricing together and some images together of just what's an example of what's out there. It's not necessarily a proposal for what the city should do, but just to get going on the conversation and hopefully try to get something done in 2020.
Basically, what we had discussed was where the city has existing traditional water fountains, what the cost would be to add a bottle filler system to that fountain. And we looked at our existing city facilities, City Hall, Public Safety and Municipal Court, Public Works facilities. I don't know that we would recommend doing it to every single fountain that we have in those facilities, but picking a couple of widely used areas as an opportunity. The cost varies by fountain, just depending on what fountain's already there and what it would take to change those out. We also looked at replacing fountain, say at Etowah River Park at the concession stand, with one that includes a bottle filler, and then also alternatives for bottle fillers along with water fountains, along with pet watering stations along the trails within the parks. Mr. Hooper and his staff put together some ideas and kind of some costs for what are out there. They vary. So, if you're doing a full fountain bottle station that's attached to a facility, it might be as much as $5,000 capital cost for that. Some of the standalone units might be as little as $1,200 to $1,500, depends on the bells and the whistles and finishes and what have you. We just wanted to get some direction from council that that's something that you want us to be looking into, because, again, as we're working on trail projects and things like that, we'd like to kind of get the standard created so that, as we're adding 1.5 miles of trails, do we need to add, a couple of stations or a station somewhere in there? What does that look like and how does it work? So we want to give you some ideas of those. And then if this is the direction you want to move, what we would probably do is work to identify a specific vendor so that we could try to get the best cost by getting that vendor to retrofit existing and give us a proposal on equipment moving forward.
Thanks, Mr. Peppers.
Could we use tourism funds for something like
So
this?
most of, so most of these, like associated with the Trail of the Park, we would probably utilize impact fees or SPLOST and make it part of the actual development of what's going on, depending on the project. I kind of see it no different than a bench or a trash receptacle. It's an amenity. It will be supplied by city water, so there's a possibility that water funds can go towards those, and maybe there's an educational component. We won't use sewer funds because we don't want sewer in our water fountains. But, and then moving forward, as we're looking at other projects, if we've got a standard out there, it's just simple to say, add that in as part of that project, one of our standard pieces of equipment.
Who's going to pick the one that we buy?
I think what we would suggest is really getting with a vendor and having a vendor come in and look at all of the different areas that we're considering and bring us back a good proposal. For instance, in this building, a vendor may come in and say, we can retrofit the water fountains that are here, but, the water fountains that are here may be 20 years old in part of the building. It may be cheaper to go with a brand new system, and this is what would work best based on your user. So, colors and materials, that's a little different, but we would probably ask a vendor to
Yeah,
give
that
us.
one looks like it's water bottles and pedestrian and pet.
I tried to give you pictures of variety.
Yeah,
Pretty cool, isn't it?
Like that one.
I think it's a great idea, and I think, opportunities to look, citywide and ways to reduce our environmental footprint is certainly beneficial to all of us, and I think it's a great idea. I know a lot of citizens have asked for those, for the, bottle fillers and also for the pet drinking stations as well, so.
The one thing that we do have to be mindful of is that not all of our parks do have water in certain areas. So some of it's going to be based off of where we actually have existing water lines, and what we can do best in those areas to get the best product. We may not move forward with installing brand new water lines just to get a fountain in a certain area of a park. But if we've got ongoing projects, it may be that that's the time to get water in those areas as well. So.
I think there are some, like, for events and all where we do not have water, I think there are some portable and modular units that are available that could be a possibility for some that we could move around, from time to time. But I think it's a great idea. So,
Mr. Peppers, you mentioned, I'm sorry, Bill, you mentioned bringing in a vendor. Would you consider bringing in multiple vendors? Because a vendor may only have two solutions, for instance, that don't suit our needs.
Absolutely. It would probably be, again, some type of request for qualification type process where we try to vet out a vendor and find out what type of product we can get.
Perfect.
Great. Okay. Now we're ready.
Your turn.
Sorry about that. I'm getting a little too eager here. So for my report, I've got a few things that I'd like to address tonight. First, annual mayor pro tem appointment. Charter calls for the mayor to make an annual appointment for mayor pro tem. and that's my intention to do one annually. And tonight I'd like to nominate Councilmember Joellen Wilson to serve as Mayor Pro Tem for 2020, and I know she'll do a great job at that. She has some experience. I think she served previously in that role a couple administrations ago. So I
don't be absent.
I don't plan to.
Don't
But
slide it in yet. They got to vote.
yeah, we have to vote. So I make the nomination. I entertain a second of the nomination.
Second.
So we have a second, and all members in favor say aye.
Aye.
All members opposed, nay. All members voted for the appointment. Congratulations, Ms. Wilson. Next thing I would like to do is discuss a committee to review our alcohol ordinance. I know over the past couple of years we've had a lot of discussion over various aspects of our alcohol ordinance. We've made some changes to adapt to state updates and guidelines, such as additions of breweries being able to serve craft beer and sell their products on site, and growler shops and other developments. And sometimes we've kept up to date with state standards, sometimes we haven't. We've had discussions about the entertainment district and open container, and lots of debate about that and elimination of that and so forth and so on. And I just think it's time that we review our entire alcohol ordinance from a comprehensive perspective, and include the entertainment district in that, and special events, and everything, our food to alcohol ratios and everything that's included in that, and look at best practices, from other cities. And I think we had a citizens committee that made some recommendations a year or so ago, and again, look at all of our available information that we have, our current ordinances, and what other cities are doing, and discuss our course of action at that time. So I'd respectfully appoint Councilmember Sandy McGrew to serve as chair of this committee, along with Council members Tolan and Schmidt to serve on the committee as well. And I would like to ask that they bring back the recommendations to council no later than our March work session. So if you want to do it before that, that's great, but we'd like to review those recommendations, just hear what you have to say, and then we'll consider our course of action at that time. But we would like to get this resolved and get it moving forward, and carry on with business. So thank you. Next, other council committees and appointments. I've got a few others to make tonight. First, I need to make an appointment to the Cherokee County Development Authority to replace Mayor Hopgood, who served us so well on that board during his tenure. And so tonight I'm appointing our city manager, Billy Peppers, as the city's appointee to the Cherokee County Development Authority effective. So we look forward to him representing our interests and reporting back to us on the progress that we're making. Next, I recognize that we have a lot of work to do and a lot of challenges ahead. And also recognize that all council members were elected by their constituents to represent them and represent their interests. And if we're going to be creating a master plan to move Canton forward, it's going to take all of us and all of our citizens involved to really kind of move Canton forward. So with that in mind, I'm a big believer in delegating and collaborating. And so I'm going to establish 6 primary council committees in areas that I think are critical to our success moving forward as we plan. It's not my intent of these chairs, to be the only ones that study these topics or are experts on these topics, but really to attend meetings and understand these topics in depth and report back to council as a whole. And I would like for these committees to make quarterly reports to council beginning in April. I'll give the first quarter for just kind of organizational purposes, and then I'll ask for 2 committee reports at each work session going forward for that for each quarter. tonight I would like to name those committees and the committee chair people, and I think I have discussed this with everyone, and everyone's eager to work and get to work and excited. I'm excited and appreciate the efforts. So we're going to establish a water and sewer committee, and Mr. Estes is going to serve as chair of that committee, and we know we've got lots of work to do there. Housing committee, Mr. Tolan is going to chair that committee and has already been doing some great work in that area. Economic development, Ms. Schmidt is going to chair that committee and look at ways to bolster our economic development, also ways to make Canton the #1 city in Cherokee County to do business and open a business and start a business and all those other great things that she's going to do, within the first few weeks. And so community development, building and zoning, of course, is something that is going to be critical as we create our master plan moving forward, and I've asked Ms. McGrew to chair that committee. Roads and transportation, of course, is something that is critical, and Ms. Wilson is going to be chairing that committee. And then we'll have public safety as our 6th committee, and our future Ward 2 council member that will be elected in May will be chairing that committee. And so I'll ask all of you to get together with our city manager and discuss how you want to proceed with these and discuss appropriate staff members that will be your contacts for these committees and how you want to move forward and get organized. And I'll leave that up to you, and I'm willing to help in any way. But I look forward to you guys doing great work in this area and reporting back to us beginning in April. And we'll set up a schedule for which committees report in those work sessions. And we know water and sewer will probably one of the first ones on the list. So, yes.
I just wanted to remind you, Ms. McGrew is going to be the chair of the Alcohol Ordinance Review Committee, but I just wanted to remind you, I think that the March work session is the session that Mr. Tolan and I are absent for training.
Yeah. I remember that, and again, the reports won't begin until April. So.
Oh, I meant for the
alcohol. You said
the
March.
alcohol review.
Oh, that's right. So okay,
Just a reminder.
we'll look at that and see. So, and maybe you guys can meet, and if you get your work done sooner, you can report back, or maybe Ms. McGrew can give the report for a committee. So we'll look at that. And again, I do want to. I don't know of any issue that we may have to vote on at that work session, but it will be critical with Mr. Tolan and Ms. Schmidt being out that the rest of us be present at that meeting. So we will have a quorum. I think we will need the rest of us here, correct? So please mark that date on your calendar. The next item, I've discussed my desires to really get the next generation involved and how important I think it is to engage them and give them reasons to love Canton as much as we all do. And I've kind of named this program the Canteen program. And the keynote of this program will be the Canton Teen Council that I'd like to create. And the Canton Teen Council will consider a lot of the same agenda items as mayor and council considers. And this is really just to get their viewpoints on items that we're considering. It's to engage them. It's to create their interests. It's also to mentor future leaders and get them involved in how the city operates and decision making. And really the overall intent is really just to listen to them and get their perspective and understand what their goals and dreams and desires are for the city. And I've talked to a lot of our teenagers, and I'm really, really excited that they are so willing to participate and engage in this program. And I'm excited and eager to get this started. And we're going to begin. We've already started establishing a steering committee for this program. And I'm happy to report it will include 3 of our local teenagers who've already graciously agreed to serve on that steering committee. They'll be actively involved in kind of creating the teen council procedures and guidelines, as well as some staff members and council members and myself. And those teenagers are Lauren Taylor, Michael Garcia, and Sophia Melbourne. So I wanted to thank them. I know Lauren was here at least earlier and couldn't stay. She has a school day tomorrow. But we look forward to working with them. And we've got a lot of young adults that are very interested in this program, and we'll find a place to engage and them all. And to that intent, we're going to intend to hold a teen town hall meeting in the first quarter of this year. So we'll be pulling that together and scheduling that and getting that information out in the near future. And hopefully we'll have a lot of our teenage constituents at that meeting, and we can hear from them and hear what their concerns are and get them engaged at that point. And the next item is on commissions and board appointments. The city really cannot, we have elected officials here, but we really cannot function without our city volunteers, our boards and commissions, and all the great work that they do, and we really appreciate that. We couldn't move forward without them. We have quite a few positions that did expire on December 31st of last year now. But with the new city council that we have, one of the items that we'll be discussing at our February retreat, which is coming up in just a few weeks, is sort of how we want to move forward on these boards and commissions and appointment procedures to these, how we want our volunteer boards to work, and how we want to use them into helping shaping our plan for the city. And so with that in mind, I don't really want to make any appointments before we have those discussions. I think it would be premature. So I would like, and I really appreciate that the current members that are currently serving in those positions continue to serve for a couple of months until we figure that out and make some appointments at that time. And I think we'll be sending out a letter, I think, tomorrow to those members. I just ask them to hang on a couple more months and until we figure that out and discuss the best way to move forward. So again, we appreciate all their efforts. So and I think with that being said, I think we are at the end of our first meeting of the new decade, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I can make a motion.
So Ms. Wilson made the motion, a second. I think Mr. Tolan. All in favor say aye.
Yes, sir.
All opposed? All members voted for the motion. Thank you, good night, and Happy New Year to everyone. So. Well, that's a condemnation.
Yeah, I just do the road work. And I don't know what's going on.